Chapter 684. Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with hesitation. Should she fix the cement road? But when she thought about how the main mode of transportation was horses, she dismissed the idea. The journey was very smooth. When they arrived at Yuheng, Gong Yimo couldn't help but sigh at how fast the development was. The entire street was renovated, and the clothes of the people were obviously of a higher level. Because Yuheng country was located between Luyi and Dayu state, if they wanted to be strong, they had to be unique. Therefore, when Gong Yimo was here, she and Kim Yun explored many ore veins. Not only did they improve their mining techniques, they also improved their smelting techniques. Now, Yuheng's metal exports were the best in the 4 countries. The goods produced were all hard currency, and the demand in the other 3 countries could not meet the demand. When they arrived at the capital of Yuheng, Kim Yun personally came to welcome them. After a year, he finally saw Immerse again. Under the tall city gate, Kim Yun was dressed in a dragon robe, with a jade belt around his waist and a purple gold crown on his head. He was surrounded by hundreds of officials and looked very dignified. His unique good looks were not suppressed by his luxurious attire. Instead, it made him look even more exquisite. The cinnabar mole at the corner of his eye added an enchanting charm to his luxurious attire, but it did not make him look feminine. Now, he was only below 1 person and above tens of thousands of people. Every time everyone saw Kim Yun, they would hate the heavens for being biased and giving all the good fortune to 1 person, until they saw the regent. To be honest, when these 2 people stood together, it was simply a disaster. Many people ran out of the city to watch. Although they were stopped by the guards from afar, the elegance of these 2 people was enough to make people admire them even from afar. Gong Dai rarely wore colors other than black. Today, he wore a rare black robe. That soft color diluted the murderous aura that made people not dare to look at him directly and added to his original cold temperament. His facial features were not inferior to Kim Yun's, not to mention his silver-gray hair. Coupled with his clear black eyes, he looked like an immortal. He first got down from the horse and then turned to hold Gong Yimo's hand. Gong Yimo was wrapped in a fur coat and looked very cute. After getting down from the horse, she looked at Kim Yun and then looked at Gong Dai. When Kim Yun saw Gong Yimo, he couldn't help but smile. It was clearly winter, but everyone's heart seemed to be filled with flowers. Kim Yun Gij, Gong Yimo excitedly shouted. When she saw Kim Yun approaching, she didn't wait for him to speak and shook her head with a sigh. Standing beside the 2 of you, I feel ashamed. Kim Yun heard this and his smile became even brighter. He couldn't help but glance at Gong Dai and compare them in his heart. It was undeniable that although their appearances were similar, Gong Dai's cold and majestic aura was like a sharp sword, shocking people. Immerse, are you okay? Kim Yun retracted his gaze and looked at Gong Yimo with a smile. He knew what happened at Immerse's wedding and that she jumped off a cliff. It was the Dayu state's crown prince who risked his life to save her life. Thinking of this, his expression became even more pitiful. Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied with Kim Yun's gaze. He took a step forward and pulled Gong Yimo behind him. He coldly said, "Thank you for your concern, Yuheng Kuan. This Princess Wang Fei is fine." This kind of forceful declaration of sovereignty made Gong Yimo blush a little. However, Kim Yun slightly raised his eyebrows. Under the golden crown, a pair of watery eyes were mesmerizing. He lightly smiled. "If we remember correctly, Immerse hasn't married you yet, right?" The failure of the previous wedding had always been a thorn in Gong Dai's heart. He pursed his lips and released a cold aura. Everyone felt that the weather was even colder. She will marry sooner or later. After all, she has this prince's child in her stomach. When he said this, Kim Yun's eyes darkened. He also knew that Immerse was pregnant. However, he quickly pulled himself together and smiled at Gong Yimo. "Immerse, your child is my child. When the time comes, I'll be his godfather, okay?" This difference in treatment was too obvious. To Gong Dai, he called himself we, but to Gong Yimo, he called himself I. Gong Yimo blinked and giggled. "That's good. It's his honor to have such a beautiful godfather like you." Gong Dai's face darkened. He was still alive. What godfather? However, since the royal sister agreed, Gong Dai couldn't say anything. In any case, he wouldn't bring Immerse to Yuheng if he didn't have anything to do. It's getting late. This Princess Wang Fei is tired from the long journey, so I'll go to the post house to rest first. Many thanks to Emperor Yuheng for welcoming me. Kim Yun smiled gently. How can the post house accommodate people? Knowing that Immerse is coming, we have already tidied up the palace and set up a banquet. Regent, please? Gong Dai narrowed his eyes, feeling dissatisfied in his heart. What was this person thinking? He actually wanted the royal sister to live under his nose? However, Gong Yimo couldn't bear to disobey him and agreed. Big brother Kim Yun, thank you for your trouble. Then I'll be disrespectful to refuse. Everyone shivered. It had only been a while, but why did the sky become even gloomier? Lo Chi and the others glanced at their prince's dark face and became extremely vigilant. It seemed like they couldn't be careless even if they lived in Yuheng. They would definitely protect the princess with their lives. Just like this, the group smoothly entered the palace. Kim Yun set up a banquet to welcome them. After not seeing each other for a long time, he felt that there were many things he wanted to say to Immerse. Therefore, at the banquet, Kim Yun sent the ministers to report to the regent about the riot. Then, he talked to Gong Yimo about other things. Immerse, I heard that you were injured. Are you all better now? Kim Yun revealed a worried expression. At the time, he had also searched for a long time, but he didn't expect that Gong Dai would find Immerse first. Gong Yimo happily drank a mouthful of wine. She narrowed her eyes and said, Don't worry, big brother Kim Yun. My body is great. That's good. Kim Yun's heart felt sour. He thought that time could wash away everything, but when he saw Gong Yimo's smiling face again, he could only sigh. Now that the mining industry is doing better and better, and the entire Yuheng's GDP has doubled, all of this is due to your efforts. This toast is to you. Speaking of the past, Gong Yimo also felt a little nostalgic. Back then, she had stayed in Yuheng for 2.5 years. She still had feelings, especially those mines and refineries. They were all built by her and Kim Yun together. Now that they were reaping good profits, she was very gratified. She raised her wine cup and drank it with Kim Yun. Gong Dai didn't look over, but the ministers who reported to him were trembling. They all felt that the regent of Daiyu State was very imposing. Big brother Kim Yun, after the improvement of smelting technology, not only can it be used to forge utensils, swords, and furnaces, it can also be used to build bridges, houses, cars, ships, and flour. You can give the information I left you before to the Ministry of Works to grind it. It's best if they can draw inferences from it. She thought of something and added, I've already given the ratio of cement to the Ministry of Works. When combined with steel, we can build the tallest buildings. Chapter 685. Kim Yun smiled. Then when the time comes, I'll build a stargazing tower and invite you to come and play. Sure. Gong Yimo replied crisply, completely unaware that a certain someone was clenching his cup. The two continued to talk about smelting technology. It wasn't that they hadn't considered the steam engine. Although the principle was simple, the coal mines were still under development. Furthermore, although the smelting technology had improved, it hadn't been popularized yet. Gong Yimo hoped that the 4 countries would develop and not have a monopoly. Thus, she didn't intend to bring out the steam engine technology yet. She would wait until the improved smelting technology was popularized. Kim Yun seriously noted down some of Gong Yimo's suggestions and sincerely thanked her. Thank you, Immerse. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what I would be like today. Thinking back, if it wasn't for Gong Yimo's help time and time again, he might have given up, lost his will, and disfigured his face. He would have been exchanged for 1,000 horses by his dead father. How would he have the status and power he had today? He asked himself more than once. If he had expressed his feelings earlier, would he have gotten more? Gong Yimo couldn't help but recall her previous life. His disfigured face and sorrowful appearance for the rest of his life. She couldn't help but laugh. It's all in the past. She narrowed her eyes. Because the hall was warm, she took off her fur coat and wore only a light green cotton dress. Her entire person was as delicate as a newborn willow branch. Kim Yun couldn't help but stare blankly. How much did he want to have such a delicate and quick-witted wife? Seeing him in a daze, Gong Yimo drank a mouthful of wine and said affirmatively, "Don't think too much. If it wasn't for anything else, even if it was for your face, I would have helped you as a friend. No matter how many times, as long as I'm around, there will be a share for me and a share for you. Who asked you to be my big brother Kim Yoon?" Kim Yoon suddenly smiled. Immerse always said that he was beautiful, but she didn't know that in his eyes, she was the most beautiful. Her exquisite face was gentle and sharp, enough to cause the downfall of a city. He held back his greed and said in a low voice, "Then, for this face, I'll give you a toast." Gong Yimo nodded and drank another cup with a smile. The difference was that although Kim Yoon was smiling, his heart was overflowing with bitterness. If she really liked this face so much, could he have used this face to keep this person? On the other side, Gong Dai suddenly changed the shape of the bronze wine cup. The ministers sitting in a circle were terrified. What was the Prince Regent doing? Gong Ju faintly said. My hands slipped. Gong Yimo drank a few more cups and looked at the singing and dancing in the hall. None of them can dance as well as you. Gong Yimo still remembered the dance that Kim Yoon danced when she left. It could be said that it was integrated into his life. If it was in the past, she could still ask Kim Yoon to dance again with a straight face. But now, she was married, and Kim Yoon was also the ruler of a country. She wouldn't mention those unreasonable requests. But when she thought that no one would be able to appreciate that kind of dance, Gong Yimo felt a little regretful. Kim Yoon smiled lightly, and the whole hall was like a blossoming flower. As long as you like it, I'll dance for you. Bang! A sound interrupted Kim Yoon's words. The ministers surrounding the Prince Regent wanted to escape. This person was so scary. Could they still communicate properly? Clearly, they were all seriously reporting the situation of the upheaval. Woo-woo. Kim Yoon saw Gong Dai suddenly stand up and slightly raised his eyebrows. Prince Regent, is the wine and dishes not to your taste? Gong Dai looked at him coldly. When two equally outstanding men looked at each other, there were fierce sparks. Many people present unconsciously swallowed their saliva and didn't dare to speak. The dancing girls panicked and messed up their movements. The music also changed the tune, but no one noticed it. The wine and dishes are okay, but this prince's princess is tired from the journey and needs to rest. Please allow this prince to take her back first. Kim Yoon gritted his teeth. He still had a lot to say. Gong Dai stared back without showing any weakness. That was his wife. There seemed to be smoke floating in the air. Gong Yimo quickly mediated. Speaking of which, I'm a little tired. Kim Yoon Gij, then I'll leave first. Kim Yoon saw that Gong Yimo was tired. Even if he was reluctant, he still swallowed the words of persuasion. Since that's the case, Immerse, rest early. Gong Dai's face was ashen as he took Gong Yimo away. His murderous aura was so strong that it was as if he wanted to eat someone. Everyone sighed in their hearts when they thought of the time when these two men fought over the princess. After Gong Yimo left, Kim Yoon didn't have any appetite. The banquet ended early, and he went back to rest. His lonely figure made people's hearts ache for him for no reason. The palace servants led the way in front, but they were trembling. The Prince Regent behind them was so scary. Even if he didn't say a word, he was still scary. They really pitied the palace servants of Dayu State. With such a Prince Regent, Yu Hung was better. His majesty was so gentle. Gong Yimo's hand was grabbed by Gong Dai, and he used a lot of strength. You're hurting me, Gong Yimo couldn't help but say. At this moment, Gong Dai suddenly braked. In the snow, he asked coldly, word by word, Royal sister, don't I look good? Gong Yimo was confused. Gong Dai continued, if you want to see me dance, I can dance for you too. Gong Yimo was embarrassed. Gong Dai was jealous, even if she treated Kim Yoon as her brother. She hesitated for a moment and said to the palace servants in embarrassment, you can all leave. I know how to get to Lingyun Palace. The palace servants were relieved and quickly ran away. Gong Yimo's words made Gong Dai even more jealous. This was Yu Hung. Royal sister was so familiar with this place. Didn't it show how close she used to be with Kim Yoon? Royal sister, have you recovered your memory? Gong Dai asked seriously. Don't try to lie to me. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. I heard everything you said to Kim Yoon. Her words were clear as if everything was under control. Gong Yimo blinked and didn't know how to answer. His frosty, handsome face darkened even more. So many things happened between the two of you. Gong Yimo didn't know if it was an illusion, but she could hear the heartache in his cold voice. She scratched her head and carefully tried to please him. No, I've experienced the most with you, and it's the most unforgettable. I only treat Kim Yoon as my brother. Gong Dai's expression softened. He knew that royal sister wouldn't think of Kim Yoon, but when he saw Kim Yoon and royal sister talking happily and talking about things that he couldn't interrupt, he couldn't help but feel jealous. He really wanted to lock royal sister in his body and not let anyone see. Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. She thought that this matter was over, but Gong Dai suddenly asked, "If it weren't for me, royal sister, would you have married Kim Yoon?" Chapter 686. Gong Yimo was stunned. Marry Kim Yoon? Actually, she had thought of this before. If she was 18 years old and really wanted to find someone to marry, it would be best if she could marry Kim Yoon. After all, Kim Yoon was really a good match. However, it was just a thought. It was impossible. Gong Yimo's slightly stunned expression had already revealed her answer. Gong Ju's anger soared to the sky. He couldn't help but clench his teeth and smack Gong Yimo's little buttocks. He told her word by word, "Gong Yimo, let me tell you, no matter how many times you reincarnate, you can only like me. You can only be with me." Gong Yimo was a little innocent. "Didn't you just say that if you weren't there?" Seeing Gong Dai's handsome face turn gloomy, Gong Yimo snickered. "If you were there, what else is there to say? I would only choose you." Gong Dai was strangely appeased. However, he felt that he couldn't let her off just like that. "Really? Didn't you think that I'm good-looking and can dance well?" "That's true." Seeing Gong Dai squinting his eyes, Gong Yimo quickly added, "But you're the most good-looking, and you know how to wield a sword. I like to watch you wield a sword more." Gong Dai's face turned gloomy, and he didn't say anything. Gong Yimo took the initiative to tiptoe and kiss him. "All right, my vinegar jar." She sighed softly and looked at him attentively. Her voice was extremely gentle. "Even if you're disfigured, even if you lose your martial arts, I'll still love you. I'll only love you. Okay? Don't be jealous." Gong Dai pursed his lips, but his heart was beating very fast. In the snow, he didn't have any spirit. He was just like an ordinary man in love, who also had some strange worries and strange assumptions. However, her kiss could erase everything. "I'll only love you." Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly and suddenly frowned as he muttered, "Every time I think I love you to the extreme, but the more I look at you, the more I love you. Tell me, what should I do?" Gong Yimo was delighted to hear that. Of course it's to love him without holding back. "I'll love you more and more." Just as the two of them were enjoying their sweet moment, a female voice suddenly interrupted them. "This is really the envy of others." Gong Yimo was stunned. She looked up and saw a familiar face. It was Yunjin. Now that she thought about it, her husband, Wang Jing, was the lord of a city. He could still bring her into the palace. The ministers only needed to pretend that they did not know her. Gong Dai didn't like the way this woman stared at the royal sister. "Let's go, royal sister. There's no need to pay attention to irrelevant people." He didn't forget that the royal sister needed to rest. However, Gong Yimo patted his hand and said, "It's okay. She's also an old friend of mine. We'll stay in the palace in front. Can you go back and wait for me?" Gong Dai frowned. However, Gong Yimo leaned over and kissed him. Her eyes were watery. "Okay." Gong Dai's heart softened. He touched her head and said helplessly, "As you wish." Based on his investigation, there was no one more powerful than the royal sister in the entire Yuheng Palace. Moreover, he had hidden guards by her side, so he wasn't afraid that she would be in danger. Since the royal sister wanted to settle some personal grudges, he wouldn't interfere if she didn't want to. "Why are you looking for me?" After watching Gong Dai leave, Gong Yimo went straight to the point and asked. Back then, she pitied Yun Jin's innocence and helped her time and time again. However, She didn't know that human nature was complicated. She didn't know when she started to be jealous of her. In the end, she even attacked her. Therefore, Gong Yimo didn't have a good impression of Yunjin. Yunjin heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Gong Dai leave. She instinctively felt that the man was stubborn and difficult to deal with. It would be easier to talk to him if Gong Yimo was around. I want you to help me regain the position of Empress Dowager. Gong Yimo thought that she had misheard. She smiled and said, "That's strange. Why are you looking for me? Moreover, why should I help you?" Yunjin relaxed when she saw that there was no one around. Her charming face was full of resentment as she said plaintively, "Yun will only listen to you. That's why I'm looking for you. If you're willing to help me, I'll give you 10% of the profits from Yuheng's Golden Jade Bank. I know that you have 10% in your hands. If you take my 10%, you'll have 20% of the profits. Is this deal worth it, princess?" Speaking of which, Kim Yun really treated Yunjin well. Although she was removed from the position of Empress Dowager, he was afraid that she would feel wronged. He actually gave her 10% of the profits from the Golden Jade Bank. This amount of profit was enough to make her husband, who already owned a city, green with envy. No, it should be said that no one wouldn't be jealous of this 10% of the profits. If it wasn't for the fact that she had no other choice, Yunjin wouldn't have thought of using this to make a deal with Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo's pupil shrank slightly. Then, she smiled faintly and said, "Do you know how much 10% of the profits is?" Yunjin didn't know, but every time she went to the bank to withdraw money, it was as if she could get an endless amount of money. Gong Yimo sneered and asked, "You know that I have 20% of the profits. If I want to do something, if I have any bad intentions, how dangerous would Kim Yun be?" In the snow, perhaps because Gong Yimo's expression was too serious, Yunjin actually felt a little guilty. Why would you have any bad intentions towards Yun? She had seen all those things in the past. Gong Yimo had helped Yun without any reservation. She had even considered the development of Yun after she inherited the throne. Yuheng had the smallest land area among the 4 countries. Whether it was the development of agriculture or animal husbandry, it couldn't compare to the other countries. In order to not fall behind in the future, she had been busy every day during the 2.5 years in Yuheng. She had dug a river channel and opened a mine. She had directly opened a new development path for Yuheng, and it had an industry that was ahead of the other 3 countries. These were all things that Yun had told her later. Since Gong Yimo had done so much for Yun, then what did it matter if she had 10% or 20% of the profits from the Yuheng Bank in her hands? Gong Yimo had a headache and held her forehead. Kim Yun had such a mother who didn't know what was important and what was important. She didn't know how unlucky Kim Yun was. A person's heart can change, Your Highness, just like how I didn't expect that a cowardly person like you would bite back at me one day. Yun Jin's expression instantly turned ugly. Seeing that she was Kim Yun's mother, Gong Yimo sighed and said, "If you still have the least bit of self-awareness as a mother, then don't mention this today. I'm sure that Kim Yun Gij won't allow you to speak of this matter. No matter who gets the 10% of profits in your hands, it's a very dangerous matter for Yuheng. If you don't want to spend your life in war, then it's best to rot in your stomach." Seeing that Gong Yimo had turned to leave, Yunjin had no choice but to start sobbing. "But other than you, no one can help me. You don't know how overboard Wang Jing is. After he got an official position, he changed. It's not enough that he married me, he even took a concubine. My poor child was just born not long ago." Chapter 687. Gong Yimo thought of the ordinary-looking Wang Jing and said coldly, "You're Kim Yun's birth mother. Wang Jing wouldn't dare to take a concubine. The only possibility is that you've touched his bottom line. For example, you want to find a boy toy?" Gong Yimo looked at her with amusement as her face turned paler. "Yunjin, you're no longer the Empress Dowager, and he's no longer a boy toy. You don't have any power in your hands. How can you still have such naive thoughts? Do you think you can do whatever you want after getting married?" Seeing that Gong Yimo guessed it so easily, Yunjin understood everything. "Sure enough, you're the one who set me up. You've already guessed the outcome, but you still dug a hole for me to jump into. How can you be so vicious?" Yunjin's face gradually became distorted as she looked at Gong Yimo with hatred. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. If you say I'm vicious, then I'm vicious. Anyway, no matter what I do, you won't think of me as a good person. Why should I meddle in other people's business? If Yunjin didn't do anything and just stayed by Wang Jing and their child's side, how could Wang Jing dare to disrespect her? He was just asking for it. She turned around, and Yunjin's indignant voice came from behind her again. Gong Yimo, you're really not going to help me? You owe me this. You should return it to me. Gong Yimo waved her hand with her back facing her. Her fur coat and snow blended into one. Even though she was pregnant, she was still carefree. If you're sick, you can't stop taking medicine. Seeing that Gong Yimo wasn't moved by the benefits, Yunjin really had no other choice. She stomped her foot and said faintly, You forced me to do this. Gong Yimo, you'll regret it. The next morning, Gong Dai and Gong Yimo went to Yuheng's dungeon to see the rioters who were being controlled by Kim Yun. These people's eyes were lifeless. Their condition was even worse than Xue Wuxi's. Xue Wuxi still had moments of clarity, but these people were like wandering ghosts without orders, walking back and forth in the prison. Because they were all ordinary civilians, they couldn't break the iron cage. Gong Yimo observed for a while and said to Gong Ju, I don't know what Xue Qianzhong is doing. It seems like he's changing the poison and making it more violent. Gong Dai saw her worry and comforted her softly. It's okay. We still have Stone Heart. Plus, the 4 countries are killing the remnants of the Snow Clan. They can't go to your mother's place, and there's no place for them to stay. They won't be able to do much. Something's not right, Gong Yimo suddenly said. Snow clearly knows that I have Stone Heart, and my orders are higher than his. So how could he still spread poison? The only possibility is that they've found a way to restrain Stoneheart. He can nullify Stoneheart's orders. When Gongi heard this, he also felt that it was inappropriate and ordered someone to bring Monkey over. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try. So, in the dungeon, Gong Dai stuffed the holy stone into Monkey's mouth. Monkey cried out uncomfortably and closed its eyes. Gong Dai let Gong Yimo out because she would feel uncomfortable if she heard Monkey's cry. Gong Yimo gave him Stoneheart and walked out obediently. She felt uneasy. Gong Dai pinched Stoneheart and calmed down, gathering all his willpower in his hand. Manic. As soon as his voice fell, Monkey shrieked. But strangely, the people in the dungeon didn't feel anything. They continued to wander around. Their eyes were dim red, as if they couldn't hear anything. Gong Dai's expression was solemn. He used the string that tied the holy stone and pulled the stone out of Monkey's throat. Although it was uncomfortable this time, it didn't hurt. So Monkey obediently didn't resist. On the other hand, Gong Dai remained silent. After telling Gong Yimo the conclusion, Gong Yimo's expression changed, and she became extremely worried. What should we do? It seems that the other party has already grasped the technique of using the holy stone and changed the nature of the poison. If that's the case, we're too passive. Gong Dai saw her ugly expression and comforted her. Don't worry too much, royal sister. How can I not worry? Gong Yimo shook her head and sighed. These people are obviously ordinary people. They suffered an undeserved calamity for no reason. Moreover, there's no antidote for the poison. In the end, won't many people lose their lives for nothing? Gong Dai muttered, if there's poison, there must be an antidote. I've been sending people to find something that can counter the holy stone. Don't worry too much. It'll be fine. Gong Yimo's brows relaxed slightly. We have to catch Snow and the rest as soon as possible. As for the rest, we can only ask those who know medicine. At this moment, Kim Yun suddenly rushed over. Not good. There's another riot. This time, the location is very close. It's in a village near the capital city. What should we do? Gong Yimo made a prompt decision. How about this, brother Kim Yun? Lend me some troops and then you guard the capital city. Gong Dai, leave a group of elites here to protect brother Kim Yun. Let's go take a look. Gong Dai naturally wouldn't object to his wife's words. He asked Lo Chi to leave behind a group of 100 elites. They didn't bring many people, only 1,000, but all of them were experts. Then I'll leave it to you. Kim Yun was very worried. This kind of sudden riot had caused everyone to panic. He hoped that it could be resolved as soon as possible. Without further ado, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai immediately set off. They borrowed 3,000 men from Kim Yoon and brought 500 of their own elites to the small village. When they arrived, the sight of blood and corpses made Gong Yimo suddenly want to vomit. This was something that had never happened before. Perhaps it was because of her pregnancy. Her senses had become extremely sensitive. The smell of blood was so strong that it was pungent. Seeing her like this, Gong Dai was worried and brought her to the mountain to rest. He asked Lo Chi to bring people in to search for survivors. The villagers who had narrowly escaped death saw that their hometown had become a graveyard in a short time. They couldn't help but kneel on the ground and cry. Gong Yimo heard this and lamented in her heart. She looked up and saw the whole village from the hillside. But now it seemed that there were no survivors. Lo Chi was quickly rescued. He looked dignified and reported to Gong Dai. "Reporting to Your Highness, most of the people in the village have been captured, but some of the old and weak died tragically in the village. Their corpses are incomplete, as if they were bitten." Hearing Lo Chi's answer, Gong Yimo only felt her stomach churning again. Gong Dai hugged her with heartache. "What else did you find?" Lo Chi said, "There should be about 500 of them. Looking at the footprints, they have gone into the mountain, but there are many mines there. It's difficult to find these 500 people." Luo Xiaoqi said with some confusion, "After all, the poison people are still human. Why would they eat the corpses of the old and weak? Could it be that they have become monsters?" Gong Yimo analyzed with a pale face. "It's very likely that the new poison suppressed their intelligence and then deprived them of food. They obeyed the order to kidnap some young and strong people. But because they were too hungry, they cruelly killed the old and weak. Their nature drove them to eat human flesh. She couldn't think about it. If she did, she would vomit again." Chapter 688. In that case, the parasite didn't turn them into beasts, but the culprit deliberately turned them into monsters. Lo Chi was a little apprehensive. "No matter what, we have to find them as soon as possible." Gong Dai nodded and ordered, "Take some people and follow the footprints. They're here, so they can't have gone far. Also, send some people to the other remote villages to take a look. This prince has a feeling that this isn't the only place that suffered. They need people, or else they'll commit another crime." Gong Yimo nodded. "The culprit probably wants to gather people to attack Yuheng's capital and take control of Yuheng. Then, they'll use Yuheng as a base to attack Dayu State and Luyi. In that case, Big Brother Kim Yoon is in a very dangerous situation. It'll be fine, I'm here." Knowing that Gong Yimo was worried about Kim Yoon, Gong Dai thought of a countermeasure. It would be best if they could solve the problem once and for all. After Gong Yimo and Gong Dai returned, Kim Yoon was also a little worried after hearing what they said. At this time, the people that Gong Dai sent out also returned to report that 2 small villages near the capital had indeed been massacred. Similarly, the old and weak had died tragically, and the strong had been taken away. As the villages were too remote and no one had escaped, only now did they know that the corpses were all smelly. Gong Yimo felt a sense of crisis. In that case, the culprit might have more than 500 people. Including those who were taken away, there are at least 2,000 of them now. This was really impossible to guard against. The culprit only needed to bring the parasite and holy stone to sneak into a village to poison it. The next day, these people would all be his subordinates. Moreover, the modified parasite made people lose their humanity. They were not like Shui Wuxi, who would erupt regularly without provocation. Instead, they were in a state of madness at all times. It was as if they would tear apart the people around them with a single command. Gong Yimo couldn't help but ask, "Big Brother Kim Yoon, how many people are stationed in the capital now?" Kim Yoon said, 30,000 people. Gong Yimo frowned. "We don't know how many more goo poison they have. If we wait for them to counterattack, I'm afraid that 30,000 people won't be enough." And the difficult part was that these people were Yuheng's people. Kim Yoon definitely didn't want to kill them, but save them. But Gong Yimo hadn't found the antidote yet. "If it's possible, please invite Divine Dr. Liu and Si Wuyan over to Yuheng. In terms of medicine and poison, no one is more proficient than them." Kim Yoon nodded his head and hurriedly sent a letter to see Wu Yin, while Gong Dai also wrote a letter to divine Dr. Liu, requesting for his help. After Kim Yoon left, Gong Yimo laid in Gong Dai's arms and voiced her concerns. Gong Dai, I keep feeling that someone is helping the Snow Clan. Changing the medicinal properties of the goo poison is something that most people wouldn't be able to do, but there was one person who could, Gong Dai suddenly said. Gong Yimo also thought of that possibility. Dong Luani? Is that possible? She is involved in this matter? Nothing is impossible. If that woman wants to make a comeback, this is a chance. Gong Dai's words made Gong Yimo's heart turn cold. That's right. Lu Yi. I wonder how Dragon City's Wuji is doing. Gong Dai said, I wrote a letter to him previously, emphasizing on the terrifying medicinal properties of the goo poison, and asked him to secretly monitor the people at the sacred lake. Currently, I haven't heard of anything happening at his side. Gong Yimo sighed. I keep feeling uneasy in my heart. Moreover, we can't just sit here and wait for death. Waiting here for others to come and fight is not Gong Yimo's style. If they really fight, she has a weapon in her hands. No matter how many people there are, she is not afraid. But what she wants is not to kill, but to protect the lives of those innocent people. I have an idea. Gong Yimo suddenly had a flash of inspiration and had an idea. The winter night is cold and quiet. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai brought a few people and walked towards the mountain. Lo Chi was carrying a tied-up person on his back. When they reached the place, Gong Yimo released him, and he immediately let out a muffled roar. Gong Dai was carrying a monkey in his hand. Gong Dai looked at monkey and smiled deeply, causing it to instantly explode, but it did not dare to escape. Then it heard Gong Dai's cold voice. Eat it. Monkey knew that this person wanted it to eat the holy stone on its neck. Even if it was unwilling, Monkey still swallowed the stone. It was stuck in the pouch by its throat, making it extremely uncomfortable. What they had to do next was to wait. In order not to affect Gong Yimo had already walked far away. This plan was very simple. Even if they changed the goo poison and made it impossible for them to control the other party, the holy stones were still connected. If the people hiding in the mountain used the holy stone to issue a command, the monkey would be able to receive it. Once it made a sound, the poisoned person who was dragged out from the dungeon would act according to the command in the sound. Then they would be able to find where those people were hiding. It was snowing tonight. If the other party wanted to take action, they would definitely not miss this opportunity. Gong Dai carried Gong Yimo and dodged. Hearing the monkey's cries would cause Gong Yimo to have a headache. Gong Dai could not bear to do so, so he only left Lo Chi there to watch. Finally, when the moon was high in the sky, the monkey suddenly made a short cry. The moment it made a sound, the poisoned person who was tied up suddenly stopped moving. Lo Chi's mind was like lightning. He immediately let go of him. The poisoned person stood up. His red eyes were lifeless as he looked in a certain direction. At this moment, the monkey issued a series of commands. That meant that the mastermind was about to take action. Seeing the poisoned person suddenly rush in a direction, Lo Chi and the rest quickly followed. Gong Dai chased far behind with Gong Yimo. He held Gong Yimo in his arms. His qinggong was elegant, and his internal energy materialized, blocking all the wind and snow. Gong Yimo felt very safe in his arms. And this direction was actually the gathering place of the larger villages near the capital? It seemed that after those small villages were guarded, they did not dare to approach them. Instead, they directly attacked the larger villages? Gong Yimo suddenly asked, Gong Dai, how do you think they made the stone heart ineffective? Gong Dai guessed, I think they must have found a more accurate way to control it. Oh? Kim Yoon said that these rioters are very organized. We have experimented before with the holy stone. It can make the poisoned person hallucinate through animal cries and achieve the desired effect. However, hallucinations do not make a group of people organized. The only possibility is that they have improved the way to control the poisoned person. They have made the transmission method more complicated and accurate. So even if we have the holy stone, it will be useless if we don't know their transmission method. It was like wanting to call someone but not knowing the number. Holding the phone was useless. Gong Yimo felt a little aggrieved. She thought to herself that she had to quickly crack the other party's transmission method and stop this catastrophe. Chapter 689. The few of them followed the poison person who was being controlled. They circled around a mountain and arrived at a village behind the mountain. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo both had a feeling that this person was very familiar with the surroundings of Yuheng's capital city. It was not easy for him to find a hidden village behind the mountain in such an area with so many villages. Fortunately, Gong Yimo's group was close to the village, and the other party was still on the way. Seeing that the poisoned person was about to kill his way into the village, Lo Chi knocked him out and tied up Monkey's mouth. Only then did Gong Dai appear with Gong Yimo in his arms. Looking at the peaceful village in front of him, he thought of a plan. Lo Chi, take this king's token and go borrow 10,000 soldiers from the Yuheng emperor. Yes. Lo Chi hurriedly went, but Gong Yimo said, do we need so many people? Gong Dai nodded. There are other villages nearby here. If the other party does not want to alarm others, it is very likely that they will turn out in full force. Let's end this quickly. That makes sense. Gong Yimo hugged Gong Dai's neck. What do we do later? Gong Dai stroked her hair. We don't know how the other party is controlling the puppets. Don't get involved, or you'll get a headache when you hear those sounds. Gong Yimo nodded. What he said was true. Although she had suppressed the poison for some reason, what if it accidentally broke out again? Be careful. I feel that they are coming. Gong Dai placed her on a tree far away and kissed her gently. They are already here, but it's okay. Gong Yimo's heart instantly calmed down. She hugged Gong Dai's head and rubbed it. Then come back soon. If there's anything, you must call me immediately. Because he did not bring any hidden guards, Gong Dai was worried and reminded her. However, at such a long distance, as long as Gong Yimo called, he would definitely rush over immediately. Well, don't kill too many people. Just find the mastermind. After all, they are Yuheng's citizens. Gong Dai gave her a reassuring look and turned to leave. Not long after he left, Gong Yimo vaguely saw a large number of people appear at the entrance of the village. Luo Xiaoqi and the others quickly went to wake up the villagers, while Gong Dai stood at the door with a narrow sword. The falling snow was silent. He was just standing there leisurely, but he had the aura of a man holding back 10,000 men. Although those poisoned were ordinary people, under his control, each and every one of them had extraordinary strength and were not afraid of death. Seeing that someone was trying to stop them, they rushed forward without thinking. Gong Dai had not personally fought for a long time. Looking at them, he was actually a little eager to give it a try. However, he remembered Gong Yimo's words. He would not kill them, but only knock them out. However, there were too many of them. There were actually 2,000 of them, and none of them had any skills. It would take some time to knock them all out. Gong Yimo's heart was slightly relieved. With Gong Dai here, no matter how many people there were, it was impossible for them to rush into the village. At this time, a ghostly figure appeared under the tree. Gong Yimo was stunned. When she saw the person, she said with some uncertainty, "You are Jin Zhou?" He was Kim Yoon's brother, the eldest prince of Yuheng. At that time, he failed to harm Kim Yoon and was schemed against by Gong Yimo. In the end, he was sent to Luyi. It was unknown whether he was alive or dead. How could he appear here? Jin Zhou was not like him. In the past, he was only a showy and impractical eldest prince. But now, his whole body was covered with blue veins. His expression was cold and ferocious, like an evil spirit. It's rare that the princess still remembers me. His voice was rough and extremely unpleasant, making Gong Yimo frown slightly. Princess, you must not call people. He raised his head and smiled mysteriously. Otherwise, my people will tear the entire village into pieces. Gong Yimo could not help but laugh. To deal with you, I don't need my husband to make a move. I alone am enough. Is that so? Jin Zhou smiled maliciously. I don't know if the princess cares about Kim Yoon's little life. Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows. Kim Yoon Gij has tens of thousands of people protecting him. Do you think I will be fooled by you? Jin Zhou smiled gently. If everyone in the world was like the princess, there would be nothing for us to do. But, fortunately, there are many stupid people in the world. Gong Yimo's heart suddenly flashed with a bad feeling. Yunjin? Impossible. It's so late. What is Yunjin doing in the palace? But it's not impossible. For example, when she heard the order to mobilize the troops, she entered the palace because she was worried about the emperor. Her husband will not stop her. And Kim Yoon is not guarded against Yunjin. She can't be that stupid. Gong Yimo thought that Yunjin is Kim Yoon's mother. Would she do something to her own child? She won't. But what if someone told her that as long as Kim Yoon takes the medicine, not only will he not die, but he will also listen to her and obey her? Gong Yimo's expression slightly sank. Jin Zhou smiled again. That woman is spoiled by Kim Yoon. She has long been insatiable. In order to become the glorious Empress Dowager again, do you think she will be obedient and send the child of the same heart goo into Kim Yoon's body? Same heart goo? Gong Yimo seemed to have caught some inspiration. You can accurately control these poison people because you added the same heart goo on top of the goo poison? She has heard of this kind of goo before. It's extremely rare. Usually, it's used between a man and a woman. One party wants to keep the other party and control the other party. Jin Zhou sneered. It seems that I can't tell you too much. The princess's intelligence is really scary. Back to the topic, you have two choices now. 1. Follow me. 2. Kim Yoon becomes our puppet. Gong Yimo blinked. Follow you so that you can threaten my husband? Jin Yoon will become your puppet so that you scurrying rats can have a place to settle down? I don't want to choose either. After Gong Yimo finished speaking, she suddenly jumped down from the tree. At this moment, many people hiding in the dark appeared in front of Gong Yimo. Jin Zhou did not think that she would dare to make a move at this time and angrily said, "Don't tell me you really don't care about Kim Yoon's life? He treated you with sincerity in vain." Gong Yimo shuttled back and forth between the killers. These people were also controlled. One by one, their murderous aura soared. But after fighting, Gong Yimo felt that these people could not hurt her. Instead, she must kill Jin Zhou. If I go with you, will you let go of Kim Yoon Gij? Sorry, I've never been lucky with bad people. Gong Yimo's words made Jin Zhou's face change. His face became more ferocious. Then I can only take the princess away by force. Princess, don't ask for help. Otherwise, the people in the village will die. After Jin Zhou finished speaking, more than a dozen people suddenly emerged from the dark. This was a bit tricky. These people were all under Gong Yimo's control. If Gong Yimo really wanted to kill them, she couldn't bear it. The matter of the Snow Clan, after all, she felt that it was her responsibility. If fewer people died, she would feel more at ease. Chapter 690. Jin Zhou originally thought that victory was in his grasp, but he saw that Gong Yimo was actually so powerful. Under the siege of dozens of people, he still had the strength to fight. If this dragged on, what would he do if the regent was alerted? As a last resort, his eyes turned red and he let out a sharp whistle from his mouth. At that moment, the strength of all the assassins soared. Gong Yimo felt a piercing pain in her head. But before the pain, she was still shocked. How could Jin Zhou also use the holy stone to make a sound? Because of a moment of carelessness, Gong Yimo covered her head and screamed. She was caught by the other party. Jin Zhou was overjoyed. As he continued to disturb her, he ordered people to restrain her and then take her away. Poor Gong Yimo's head was about to explode, but she still held up her sword to resist. She gritted her teeth and decided to break out of the encirclement and escape first. But in the next second, a gust of wind blew and Jin Zhou flew out and hit a stone. He spat out blood. He struggled to get up and looked at Gong Dai. His eyes were filled with hatred. Regent, how awe-inspiring. He clenched his teeth and watched as Gong Ju defeated all of his men like a hot knife through butter. Gong Ju then held Gong Yimo in his arms. He was so close to succeeding. But in order to save your woman, you sacrificed the entire village. How cruel. As he spoke, there were flames everywhere. Without Gong Dai's obstruction, the rest of the people rushed in crazily, shouting nonstop. The disturbance disappeared. Gong Yimo rubbed her head and looked at Gong Dai worriedly. Gong Dai comforted her. It's okay. Little Seven woke up the villagers and took them away. Jin Zhou gritted his teeth. Then you can't kill me. I have the mother parasite in my body. If you kill me, those 2,000 people will be buried with me. Gong Yimo heard this and smiled coldly. Heart parasite is a parasite that binds two people together, but you can control so many people under the effect of the parasite. It's already beyond the scope of the parasite. If you die, they will die too. I don't believe it. Jin Zhou's face paled. You'll know once you try. Poor Kim Yun treated you so sincerely, but you didn't show any mercy when you slaughtered his people. Gong Yimo suddenly reached out and sucked in a sword behind Jin Zhou. On the way, the sword pierced through Jin Zhou's chest. Holding the bloody sword, Gong Yimo smiled. Let's give it a try then. I'll naturally satisfy your request. Jin Zhou looked at his chest in disbelief and spat out blood. Aren't you afraid that they will really die? In his opinion, Gong Yimo was definitely not someone who would kill the innocent. Gong Yimo looked at him kneeling on the ground and said faintly, rather than keeping you alive and letting you control those potential people to do bad things, it's better to let them all die. However, I believe in my judgment. You can't control the life and death of so many people. Her expression was firm. Firstly, she believed in herself. Secondly, when it was time to make a choice, she would be more ruthless than anyone. After Jin Zhou died, those rioting people suddenly calmed down and wandered around, looking for food like crazy. Gong Yimo asked Gong Dai to put her down. Then she waved her sword and cut Jin Zhou's throat. Sure enough, at his throat, there was a hard thing. What did Shui Qianzhong and the rest do to make people not fall unconscious after eating the holy stone? Moreover, they could use the holy stone to make sounds? It was like turning people into animals. At this time, the army arrived. Gong Yimo said to Gong Dai, you stay here and bring those poisoned people back. Also, this person's corpse needs to be studied. I'll go first. Gong Dai frowned. Where are you going? I'll go with you. Gong Yimo shook her head. Although those poisoned people are out of control, it will take a lot of effort to catch them. Time is of the essence. It's best if you stay and suppress them. Also, Kim Yoon Gij is in danger. I have to hurry back. Gong Dai was worried. If you meet someone who can disturb you again, what will you do? Royal sister, I won't allow you to fall into any danger. Gong Yimo was anxious, but Gong Dai was afraid. If he didn't come late, wouldn't royal sister be taken away by these people? Gong Yimo saw his worry and sighed. She went up and hugged his neck and kissed him. In the wind and snow, the two of them were entangled. Don't worry, I'm not a canary. We should face these storms together. Gong Yi's jade-like eyes dimmed slightly. Then you have to promise me that no matter what happens, you can't leave me behind. You have to live well. Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. Gong Dai was almost intoxicated by her smile. Don't worry, I have you and a child. I really can't bear to die. Even if I have to stand against the world, even if blood will flow like a river, I will still live. I won't let you be alone again. Gong Dai then lowered his head and kissed her, sighing, I can't do anything about you. Gong Yimo smiled mischievously. Then I'll be going. See you at the palace later. Seeing Gong Yimo walk away, Gong Dai's whole body emitted a cold aura. These people really don't know when to stop. He just wanted to live a good life with royal sister, hand in hand. He didn't want to solve one troublesome matter after another here. Gong Dai quickly led the army back and quickly controlled all the poisoned people. This time, the palace's dungeon should be full, right? Gong Yimo's Qing Gong leaped. She was burning with anxiety. If Kim Yoon really took the same heart goo, who would control him? Snow Qianzhong? No way. She couldn't let Yuheng become a battlefield, a stronghold for those disgusting people. Kim Yoon Gij, nothing must happen to you. Yoon Jin looked at the pill in her hand with some hesitation. She did not know that the same heart goo only had one mother goo and one child goo. She only knew that the other party had given her a mother goo and two child goo. At that time, she had used one of them as an experiment and found that that person was actually very obedient. When she did not order him, everything was normal. However, when she ordered him, he would come and go as he pleased. She was a little hesitant about the remaining child goo. Should she give it to Yoon or give it to Wang Jing? Actually, giving it to Wang Jing wasn't a bad idea. He would allow her to indulge and live however she wanted. But once she thought of Gong Yimo's proud face and her son being bewitched by her, obeying Gong Yimo's words, she felt uncomfortable. If her son took the child goo and listened to her, ignoring Gong Yimo. Thinking of this, Yoon Jin suddenly felt a little agitated. Then, she made up her mind. She didn't know that the mother goo of the poison in her hand was in someone else's body. It was late at night, but the palace was still brightly lit. There was no choice. They had just sent 10,000 people to suppress the riot. The emperor couldn't sleep and waited for news. The palace servants could only wait with him. Chapter 691. When Wang Jing heard that Yoon Jin was concerned about His Majesty and wanted to see him, even if it was inconvenient late at night, he immediately got up and prepared the carriage. He was still very happy to do this kind of thing that could show his loyalty to the emperor, so he sent Yoon Jin to the palace that very night. After entering the palace, Yoon Jin did not delay and went straight to the main hall. Kim Yoon was a little surprised to see Yoon Jin come to see him. Since she wanted to be the Empress Dowager again and he refused, Yoon Jin had been very cold to him. Now she even thought of caring about him. Kim Yoon was a little touched and secretly wondered if he had said too much before. As soon as the door opened, the cold air outside swept in, making Kim Yoon a little cold. He looked up and saw Yoon Jin standing alone in front of the door with a pale face. In such bad weather, his mother still came to see him. Kim Yoon smiled, and his eyes became more and more gentle. "Mother, I'm fine. It's so late at night. I've troubled you to come again." When Yoon Jin saw that her son was kind to her and not as cold as before, the guilt in her heart couldn't help but increase. She tightened the food box in her hand and forced a smile. When you have something on your mind, you can't eat. Now I don't know how long it will take for them to come back. I personally cooked some food. Try it to fill your stomach. Kim Yoon was slightly stunned because Yoon Jin hadn't cooked for a long time. Did she come this time to admit defeat and repair the relationship between mother and son? Kim Yoon naturally followed good advice. What did mother make? He hadn't eaten Yoon Jin's food for a long time because now she didn't need to do it herself, and she was also afraid of hurting her soft hands. Yoon Jin approached step by step and opened the food box. There was a small bowl inside. As soon as it was opened, the beautiful plum blossom soup appeared in front of Kim Yoon. His eyes darkened. How should he put it? His mother couldn't make such a delicious meal. Her culinary skills were probably not as good as his. But thinking that it was Yoon Jin's kind intentions, Kim Yoon didn't expose her and took out the food bowl. Plum blossom soup on a snowy night. It really has a special meaning. Mother, let's try it together. No. Yoon Jin was shocked and replied subconsciously. Then, she felt that she had answered too quickly, so she quickly said, I don't eat at night. I have to maintain my posture. Don't you know that? Kim Yoon was thinking the same thing, so he didn't force it. Yoon Jin watched as he poured the plum blossom soup into a small bowl. She was in a dilemma. On one hand, he couldn't bear to poison his son. Even if it didn't cause any harm to his body and he could still deal with government affairs as usual, it wouldn't affect him. However, poison was poison. But when she thought of how biased her son was towards Gong Yimo and how obedient her son was to her before he met Gong Yimo, her heart hardened again. She didn't say anything to stop him. So be it. She didn't want much. She just wanted Yoon to stay away from Gong Yimo in the future. She would stand her ground against all opposition and let her regain her status as the Empress Dowager. She definitely wouldn't force her son to do anything overboard. Kim Yoon looked at the plum blossom soup in front of him and thought that Mo, or loved sweets the most. When she came back, perhaps he could let her try it. So he suddenly stopped moving. Mother, Jin will use this later. It's getting late. You should go back and rest first. When he said this, his tone became even gentler. Jun is fine. Everything is fine. However, Yoon-jin was a bit anxious. It's mother's good intentions. I'll watch you drink it before leaving. This is the best plum blossom soup and bird's nest. It's hard to get even with money. Kim Yoon said a bit embarrassedly. Immerse will be back soon. She's busy working for Yuhang. Jin will share it with her later. After all, the chef in Yoon-jin's residence was the best in all of Yuhang. The ingredients used were also the finest in Yuhang. It could be seen how much he cared for Yoon-jin. Yoon-jin's face suddenly fell. Immerse, you only have Gong Yimo in your eyes. You don't care about me, your mother. She wanted to say more, but then she thought that as long as Kim Yoon ate it, he wouldn't side with Gong Yimo in the future. Why should she get angry at this time and cause some unhappiness? As expected, Kim Yoon also frowned. Mother, Immerse is very good. Why are you always picking on her? Yoon-jin suppressed her anger and said unconcernedly, All right, don't worry about her. She has the regent to take care of her. You don't have to worry about her. Seeing Kim Yoon's eyes darken, she was secretly delighted. Drink it quickly. Mother will watch you drink it and then leave. Kim Yoon sighed and finally didn't say anything. The plum blossom soup in front of him was clear and bright. Immerse was the least resistant to this kind of beautiful food. As he stirred the soup with the spoon, he couldn't help but think of the time when Immerse was still around. Every time he ate with her, she would always say a lot of interesting things. Time would also pass very quickly. Many times, they would sit around the mountain together and eat salted vegetables and steamed buns. The dignified princess would sit on the ground in coarse clothes. Her small white face would be stained, but it made her eyes as bright and dazzling as the stars. She didn't have the rule of not talking when eating or sleeping. When she chatted, her words were also unrestrained and unfocused. However, when he ate with her like this, the simple tea and plain tea would also be exceptionally sweet. But now, even if he ate extravagantly, he couldn't experience the happiness of the past. He could no longer enjoy her beauty unscrupulously because someone had forcefully taken her away and kept her as a treasure. Kim Yoon held the bowl and sighed inwardly. He was about to drink it in one gulp, but Yoon-jin, who was beside him, almost held her breath. Bang! The porcelain bowl broke and the soup splashed all over her. Who? Yoon-jin was the first to jump up. However, Kim Yoon's secret guards didn't come out to stop her, because the person who came was their emperor's most cherished person. The door was kicked open. Gong Yimo held the door and gasped for breath while holding her stomach. The thing that shot out just now was a pearl from her hairpin. They finally made it in time. Kim Yoon didn't have time to care about the mess on his body. When he saw Gong Yimo rushing back, he quickly went up to her. Immerse, what's wrong? Why are you so anxious? Did something happen? Gong Yimo gasped for breath and looked at Kim Yoon. She grinned. What can happen to me? You're the one who's in trouble, old brother. Kim Yoon then remembered that Gong Yimo broke his bowl, but that bowl was personally served to him by his mother. Could there be a problem? When Kim Yoon looked over, Yoon-jin shrieked as if she had been pricked by a needle. You're slandering me, she thought to herself. This kind of poison couldn't be detected. She would be fine even if she insisted. Could Gong Yimo do anything to her? You're saying that I've wronged you? Gong Yimo finally calmed her breath and walked in step by step. She still had the chill of the wind and snow on her body. Once she entered, the warmth made her rub her face, as if she had come back to life. She glanced sideways at Yoon-jin and pointed at the remaining plum blossom soup. The same heartgoo only has one mother and one child. Even if Kim Yoon drank it, he wouldn't listen to you. Do you still want him to drink it? Chapter 692. Gong Yimo's words were like a sudden clap of thunder. Yoon-jin widened her eyes and said after a while, I don't know what you're talking about. Yoon is my son. Why can't I visit him? Why are you maligning me? Gong Yimo saw that she still wanted to quibble, so she took out the porcelain bowl from the food box. Seeing that there wasn't much left, she placed it in Kim Yoon's hand. Here, Kim Yoon-gij, this was given to you by your mother. You should finish it. Kim Yoon looked at Yoon-jin with a complicated expression. The porcelain bowl in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He didn't believe that his mother would harm him, but he couldn't suspect Immerse either. In the endless silence, Kim Yoon's voice sounded faintly. Fine, I'll finish it. With that, he raised the porcelain bowl and prepared to drink it. Yoon was still thinking of how to smooth things over, but she didn't expect Kim Yoon to force her. But she still instinctively slapped the porcelain bowl away. The force was so strong that Kim Yoon couldn't help but take a step back. At that moment, Kim Yoon looked at the shattered porcelain bowl on the floor. It was as if something had shattered. His face suddenly darkened. Under the warm lights, his body emitted an endless chill. His beautiful eyes slowly moved from the floor to Yoonjin's face, as if he was meeting this person for the first time. He narrowed his eyes. Even the cinnabar mole at the corner of his eye was cold. I didn't. Yoonjin was frightened by Kim Yoon's gaze. She kept retreating. She still wanted to quibble, but facing Kim Yoon's coldness, she couldn't say a word. She looked at Gong Yimo with resentment and could only admit it. She lowered her head and cried, Yoon, Mother didn't do it on purpose. Mother was deceived. Mother didn't mean it. Kim Yoon took the handkerchief from Gong Yimo, wiped his body, and asked coldly, What's inside? That voice was unprecedentedly cold. Yoonjin shuddered and said in a low voice, It's the same heart goo. Before she could finish her sentence, she heard Kim Yoon sneer. That extremely exquisite face was unbelievably beautiful even when it was sneering. His laughter became softer and softer, and the pain in his heart could not be described in a few words. Men. His voice made Yoonjin tremble. She instinctively knew that something was wrong. Send her out of the palace. Yoonjin suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that Yoon didn't want to punish her. However, Kim Yoon's next sentence sent her straight to hell. In the future, without my summons, she is forbidden from entering the palace. Yes. 2 shadow guards suddenly appeared and pulled Yoonjin out. Yoonjin had yet to regain her senses. Yoon was such a gentle person. How could he be so cruel to her? Hold on. Gong Yimo, who had been watching this scene from the side, suddenly said lazily, I heard that she has 10% of the dividends from Golden Jade Bank. Kim Yoon Gij, you cannot restrict her spending, but now is a critical period. You'd better take back this 10%. Kim Yoon closed his eyes and sighed. Okay. Yoonjin saw that not only was the situation reversed, but the only thing that was worth coveting in her hands was also taken back by Yoon. She immediately became indignant. Yoon, I'm your mother. How can you treat me like this? Kim Yoon watched as she was dragged away. His face was pale, but in the end, he still did not say, You're not my mother. He paused. When you return to your former self, ask me this question again. With that, he ignored her cries and was dragged out. Gong Yimo finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she ran quickly and Yoonjin was also very stupid. Otherwise, she might have really let Yoonjin have her way. Seeing that Kim Yoon was not in a good mood, Gong Yimo sighed. Kim Yoon Gij, go change your clothes first. Everyone will be back soon. This time, we caught a lot of people. Maybe your dungeon won't be enough. Thinking that there was still work to do, Kim Yoon pulled himself together and went to the bedroom to change his clothes. He also asked Gong Yimo to come with him. He had people prepare food. It was late at night, so he needed something to fill his stomach. Gong Yimo was indeed hungry. She said calmly, I want to eat braised pork shoulder. Kim Yoon could not help but laugh. The haze from earlier dissipated. Okay, I'll prepare braised pork shoulder for you. Gong Yimo readily agreed. Kim Yoon went inside to change his clothes, while she waited outside for her braised pork shoulder. It was late at night. Gong Yimo sat down and relaxed a little. Her mind began to think. She did not know how the other party was so smart. He actually knew how to use the goo poison and together with heart to control people. The goo poison had obviously been improved. The person who consumed it would be muddle-headed and lose consciousness. Then, he would use a goo similar to together with heart to control the other party and make them more obedient. She just saw that Jin Zhou could directly use his consciousness to send out commands. It could be seen that he also had a mother goo in his body. It could make the child goo obedient, but it was not like together with heart where one would prosper and one would suffer. But he also had the holy stone in his throat. What was the use of the holy stone implanted into the human body? Was it specifically used to deal with her? Or was it that if he wanted to control those people, other than together with heart, he still needed the holy stone to complement it? Forget it. When the time came, she would properly check Jinzhou's corpse. Thinking of this, Gong Yimo could not help but sigh. She really did not know how they did it. Together with heart was very rare and hard to find even with money. Why did she feel that the other party seemed to have a lot of this goo and had even improved it? She was lucky enough to see it once in her previous life. The goo came to life when it was heated and was completely transparent. It was very rare. Wait. Gong Yimo suddenly thought of something. She jumped up and rushed into the inner hall. Kim Yoon was already taking off the last layer of clothes. His upper body was half hidden. Seeing Gong Yimo rushing in, he was instantly frightened. He subconsciously hugged his clothes. Quickly throw it away. Gong Yimo was too anxious and her voice changed. She rushed over and tore off the clothes in his hands and threw them on the ground. How could she forget that together with heart was extremely fragile? After it was preheated and incubated, in order to survive, it would automatically find a host. That bowl of soup just now directly splashed onto Kim Yoon. It couldn't have burrowed into him, right? It had its own venom which could numb pain. Even if it burrowed into him, he would not feel it. Kim Yoon was already stimulated by this series of unforeseen events. His jade face was flushed red. His hair was messy and his chest was half exposed. He looked at Gong Yimo's eyes drifted around. His eyes were watery, and he was even more seductive than a demon. But Gong Yimo did not care so much. She pushed Kim Yoon down and knelt on him. Her gaze was burning as she looked at his body. Kim Yoon did not practice martial arts. Naturally, he could not see the thin and transparent goo. Her scalp was numb as she endured her trembling body. She looked for any places on his body that had been invaded. If it had really burrowed into him, it should have left behind a small red. Being pushed down by Gong Yimo, Kim Yoon felt that his heart was about to jump out. Chapter 693. However, he still had some rationality left as he spoke intermittently. Imo, it's not good for us to do this. Although he was very willing and looking forward to it, even thinking about it in his dreams. However, when it really happened, he was worried that it would bring trouble to Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was sweating profusely. When she heard Kim Yoon's voice, her scattered attention suddenly focused. She subconsciously replied with an then continued to use all her attention to wander around his body. Fortunately, Kim Yoon's body was getting redder and redder. This made it easier for her to find him. Kim Yoon gently bit his lower lip, his expression extremely conflicted. Should he follow his heart and be together with Imo directly, or should he respect her? Based on his understanding, Imo was not the kind of person who would change her mind at the sight of a stranger. It was impossible for her to do such a thing. However, when a person was overly excited, their mind would not work well, and they would only want to follow their heart. Kim Yoon blinked and said softly, Imo, don't you regret it? After being distracted time and time again, Gong Yimo was a little annoyed. She frowned and glared at him. I'll explain to you later. Don't talk. As she said that, she completely tore off his shirt. During the process, she was extremely careful to watch her hands so that they would not come into contact with the scary little bug. Kim Yoon's upper body was completely naked. He gasped and looked at Gong Yimo with a burning gaze. He even had the impulse to ignore everything. Imo, finally, when Gong Yimo's hand landed on his chest, he grabbed it. His Adam's apple moved and his eyes were glittering, as if he had thousands of words to say. Gong Yimo was shocked by his actions. Just as she was about to say something, her eyes suddenly landed on the side of his waist. Her pupils shrank. Don't move. Her voice was trembling. In fact, when she said those words, her entire body stiffened. Only God knew how afraid she was of worms that could crawl, especially this kind of nematode. It made one's scalp tingle. Half of the almost transparent worm had already pierced into Kim Yoon's body, but he was completely oblivious to it. It was only because his body was red that the transparent white worm could be seen. Otherwise, she would not have been able to see it. However, the current situation did not allow her to think too much. Even if his heart was filled with resistance, she still reached out and grabbed the writhing worm. Ah! Gong Yimo screamed with her eyes closed. Only the heavens knew that when she reached out to grab the wriggling bug, her entire body was itching. It was as if there were countless little bugs crawling around. Furthermore, the worm was very strong. When it saw that someone was trying to pull it out, it burrowed in even harder. At that moment, Gong Yimo felt that her hair was about to stand on end. Ah! She gritted her teeth. His hand, which had been trembling all this time, exerted force. He grabbed the worm's tail and pulled it out. The moment he pulled it out, the worm's head was stained with blood, and it wriggled crazily. Gong Yimo felt that she was about to die. She held the worm and did not know what to do. It was Kim Yoon who finally realized that something was wrong. When he saw the worm, his pupils shrank. He quickly grabbed the worm and smashed it to death with his jade pillow. In the end, it was still a very weak worm. However, Gong Yimo did not feel much better. Her hand that was hanging in the air seemed to feel the worm wriggling. She was completely petrified. All the hair on her body stood on end, and she was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, Kim Yoon already knew that Gong Yimo's sudden change in behavior was to save him. Although he felt extremely regretful and disappointed, he still lowered his head and said, "Thank you, Immerse. Let's go down first." After all, her kneeling position on his body could easily cause misunderstandings. Sigh. However, Gong Yimo could no longer hear anything. She was most afraid of meatworms, and this was the first time she caught one with her bare hands. Ah, she could not think about it. Just thinking about it made her whole body itch. Seeing that Gong Yimo did not move, Kim Yoon was suddenly shocked. He reached out to touch Gong Yimo's neck and said in horror, "Immerse, why are there so many red spots on your body? What are you doing?" The door was originally open. When Gong Dai heard Gong Yimo scream, he subconsciously flew over. But what did he see? He saw Royal Sister and Kim Yoon on the same bed. Kim Yoon's clothes were half removed and Royal Sister was sitting on him with a red face. At that moment, Gong Dai's eyes instantly turned red. The entire room became gloomy. Gong Dai's voice finally brought Gong Yimo back to her senses. She was trembling all over. When she saw Gong Dai, she instantly showed a pitiful expression. "Worms. There are worms." Seeing Gong Dai stride over and hug Gong Yimo, Kim Yoon was afraid that he would misunderstand and could not help but say, "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Gong Dai turned his head and looked at him gloomily. That terrifying murderous aura filled the entire room. Kim Yoon's words were stuck in his throat, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. He did not kill Kim Yoon on the spot. This was the result of his rationality. At this moment, Gong Yimo started to scratch all over her body. "It's so itchy. There are so many worms." Gong Dai lowered his head, and only then did he realize that Gong Yimo's face was not red. Instead, there were many red spots all over her face. It was very scary. He was shocked and shouted at Kim Yoon, "What did you do to her?" Without waiting for him to do anything, Gong Yimo suddenly grabbed Gong Dai's hand and begged, "I want to take a bath. Husband. I want to take a bath." Gong Dai saw that she was in so much pain. How could he care about anything else? He quickly carried Gong Yimo and flew away. He knew that there was a hot spring in the palace and did not dare to delay for a moment. After he left, Kim Yoon slowly heaved a sigh of relief. His night was really exciting. His heart went up and down, but in the end, only disappointment was left. Gong Dai carried Gong Yimo. Before they reached the hot spring, she started to tear her clothes. Gong Dai's heart sank. He thought that Kim Yoon had done something. He hated him even more. If it was really Kim Yoon, there was no need for the Yuhang Kingdom to exist anymore. By this time, Gong Yimo had regained some consciousness. Her body was itchy. She did not know if it was because of the worms or her own psychological effect. Anyway, she was feeling very uncomfortable. It was as if her mind was filled with those worms crawling around. Finally, she entered the water. After tearing off her clothes like crazy, she repeatedly rubbed her body. The itchy feeling finally disappeared a little. But when she looked up, she saw Gong Dai standing by the side of the pool. His cold and handsome face was so gloomy that it could stop children from crying at night. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment. Then, she thought of something and instantly covered her face in horror. She looked at Gong Dai's face, which was getting darker and darker, and swallowed her saliva. She asked carefully, "If I said that we did not do anything, would you believe me?" Chapter 694. Unexpectedly, Gong Dai actually smiled. Those white teeth made Gong Yimo tremble. "Royal sister, do you think I'll believe you?" He took a step forward and looked down at her. That bone-chilling coldness made Gong Yimo shiver even though she was soaking in the hot spring. She stepped back a little. In the dense steam, that pair of big eyes looked especially delicate and pitiful. "Hubby, you didn't look at his body?" Gong Dai suddenly asked. Gong Yimo shrunk her neck. She saw it. "You didn't touch his body?" Gong Yimo lowered her head. She was just careless. Gong Dai took a deep breath. He knelt on one knee beside the hot spring and pulled her closer. His handsome face was steamed by the steam and didn't seem so scary anymore. However, that pair of black, jade-like eyes narrowed slightly. This made Gong Yimo's entire body tense up. She obediently leaned in his arms and looked up at him timidly. It was as if he was hugging a little white rabbit. Seeing her like this, Gong Dai couldn't vent his anger no matter how much he was angry. His heart was sour and unjust, but it was sweet at the same time. This little thing really knew how to act cute. Gong Dai rubbed her soft face forcefully. He felt that out of all the words that royal sister had said, only the word cute could describe his darling. "Hubby, I really didn't do anything else." Seeing that Gong Dai was softening, Gong Yimo allowed him to rub her face. She grabbed his clothes and blinked. She looked like she was about to cry. Gong Dai couldn't keep a straight face anymore. Gong Dai wanted to be more serious. After all, this was a big matter. He was almost angered to death just now. He almost killed someone. He couldn't let this little bastard get away with it. However, Gong Yimo knew him too well. She snickered in her heart, but on the surface, she still had an innocent look on her face. "Husband, someone wants to harm him. In a moment of desperation, I forgot to find someone else. If I hadn't acted quickly, the goo worm would have drilled into his body." "I didn't mean to." Gong Dai watched her approach. Her sweet fragrance and water vapor surrounded him. He knew in his heart that royal sister would not do anything to Kim Yoon. It must be a misunderstanding. However, when he thought about how royal sister had seen another man's body, he could not help but feel jealous. If it wasn't for his absolute trust in his royal sister, he would have killed Kim Yoon back then. "But he likes you." Gong Dai couldn't help but frown. Although he and the royal sister were in love with each other, when he thought about how many wolves were eyeing them, his face turned cold and his heart ached. Gong Yimo suddenly smiled secretly. Then, she grabbed his clothes and pulled him into the water. With a splash, Gong Dai was pulled into the water by Gong Yimo. Then, Gong Yimo pressed him against the side of the pool. One of them was completely drenched, and the other was completely naked. The steam rose, and there was an indescribable fragrance. "Royal sister." Gong Dai suddenly felt his voice become hoarse. After saying those two words, the rest of the words disappeared from his mouth. They were sealed by Gong Yimo's jade finger. The atmosphere instantly became ambiguous. Gong Yimo smiled innocently, but her white and rosy face and exquisite collarbone were enough to drive people crazy. The red dots disappeared. Her watery eyes were smiling, but there was a sly look in the depths. "He likes me. When he meets someone suitable in the future, he will naturally like someone else. However, I only like you." "Husband." The word husband directly made Gong Dai's body go soft, but there was still a hard place. Gong Yimo thought, "Gong Xiaoju." No matter how powerful you are, I can't take care of you? She leaned closer and said with narrowed eyes. A few years ago, when we soaked in the hot springs together, you wanted to get close to me, right? Gong Dai suddenly reached out and hugged her tightly. At that time, he missed this little seductress to death, even in his dreams. You didn't misunderstand. You were just jealous, right? Gong Yimo's fingertips untied his belt and then gently pushed aside his clothes. In the steam, his silver-gray hair hung down. His inky eyes were half closed, and his face was delicate and enchanting. Gong Yimo couldn't help but swallow. Royal sister. Gong Dai felt as if he had returned to that time. His whole body longed for her, but he didn't dare to hurt her or scare her. He could only endure it. His clothes were undone layer by layer. Gong Yimo domineeringly got up, raised his chin, and kissed him deeply. The kiss made Gong Dai's mind go blank. The sour jealousy was directly thrown away. He was confused, as if he had fallen into the clouds. Don't be jealous. Gong Yimo's lips moved away for a long time. On a snowy night by the hot springs, two delicate and enchanting people were entangled together, as if they were inseparable. In the future, I will only look at you, okay? Her fingertips brushed across his face. Gong Dai was somewhat impatient and wanted to continue kissing her, but he was stopped by Gong Yimo's hand. Don't worry, let me see first. There was a smile in her words, and there was a kind of deep teasing. Gong Dai didn't think of resisting, and he allowed her to set fire to all over his body and do whatever she wanted. The warm water gradually heated up. The two's breathing gradually became heavier, and in the end, the sound of water became louder and louder, and they couldn't stop panting. They had long forgotten why they had come here in the first place. The next day, Gong Yimo woke up on the bed. She endured the soreness all over her body and pushed the man who was hugging her. Gong Dai, you're too much of a beast. For the sake of the baby, I want to live separately from you. Gong Dai was originally sleeping soundly, but when he heard his wife's voice, he opened a pair of glittering ink-black eyes and said subconsciously, "Why do you want to live separately? Didn't I feed you enough?" It just so happened that he hadn't eaten enough either. He felt so wronged. Gong Yimo was so angry that she pinched him. "You're overindulging." Gong Dai looked at her as if he had been wronged. "Last night, it was clearly you who pestered me." He couldn't resist her in the first place, so when she took the initiative, he could only carefully enter the battle. "It was you." Gong Yimo quibbled. "I don't care. From today onwards, you're not allowed to have sex." Gong Dai couldn't take it anymore, and he said sternly, "The imperial doctor said that 4 to 7 months is fine. Be gentle, and pay attention to your posture." Gong Yimo didn't expect Gong Dai to ask such a question, and her face turned red. "The imperial doctor must have asked you to control yourself, right?" Gong Dai felt wronged. "I wasn't being presumptuous. He had known royal sister for 1 or 2 years, and he had only had sex 5 times. Was there any husband who was more wrong than him?" Gong Yimo didn't care. She just wanted to torment him. Who asked him to scare her last night? In the end, the husband and wife had a good discussion about the frequency of sex before they slowly got up. Gong Dai had now taken over all of Gong Yimo's matters, including dressing her, putting on shoes, and arranging the food that she liked to eat and could eat. He was developing into a wife-slave, but he didn't realize that Gong Yimo had accepted it as a matter of course, and her temper had grown because of his pampering. In short, this couple didn't have the status of a husband, even if Gong Dai was revered by everyone outside. Chapter 695. When he saw Kim Yoon, Gong Dai's face suddenly sank. However, after last night's intimacy, he gradually suppressed his anger. In his heart, he warned himself for the 108th time that he would never come to Yuheng again. When Jin Yoon saw the two enter together, he knew that last night's misunderstanding had been resolved. He breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a sense of loss. Gongju really trusted him wholeheartedly. If he were in Gongju's shoes, he would never be as rational as Gongju in the same situation. Perhaps this was the reason why Immerse chose Gong Dai. Last night, a lot of things happened that made everyone feel as if a stone was pressing down on their hearts. Gong Yimo did not delay. She felt that last night's turmoil was just an appetizer. In order to prevent the other party from making a big move, she had to stop it first. After breakfast, the group of people came to a secret room. Gong Yimo suggested that they cut open Jin Zhou's body to take a look. Perhaps there would be some clues. Such a bloody thing was definitely not done by her. Lo Chi cut open Jin Zhou's body. Kim Yoon's expression flashed with a trace of unbearable. This was because although Jin Zhou had always bullied and oppressed him, seeing his body being cut open after death, he still could not bear it. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai did not have this kind of feeling. In their view, when a person died, their body was no different from ordinary objects. They were all lifeless things. After cutting open Jin Zhou's stomach, a strong smell of blood assaulted them. Gong Yimo felt like vomiting again. Strangely, she had never had this kind of situation before. It only appeared after she became pregnant. "Are you okay?" Gong Dai was a little worried. "Why don't you go outside and wait for me? Later, I will tell you everything." Gong Yimo shook her head. "I'm fine. I'm not that delicate." Gong Dai pinched her face. His baby was actually very delicate, but since she didn't want to, he couldn't force her. Several people stepped forward to check Jin Zhou's body. This scene was still very impactful. Gong Dai had been looking at Gong Yimo's face the whole time. Although her face was pale, she didn't have any other discomfort, so he didn't stop her. "Give me the saber." Lo Chi handed the dagger to her. Gong Yimo took the dagger and stabbed at the heart of the corpse. "What's wrong?" Kim Yoon's face was also very ugly. Gong Yimo carefully moved, lowered her head, and said softly, "The heart with heart's goo will reside in the skin pouch below the heart, just like a blood vessel." Gong Yimo lifted the tip of the dagger and resisted the trembling. She picked up a blood-red nematode. That feeling of goosebumps came again. Gong Dai immediately took her dagger. Only then did Gong Yimo feel a little better. After the little worm entered the water, the blood cut open and turned into a transparent little worm. It was already dead. Gong Yimo's face sank. "This is the heart with heart's goo's child goo." There were only two heart with heart's goo. Once the other party had a change of heart or was disobedient, the child goo would pierce through the heart and die. But this wasn't right. There should be another reason. After all, Jin Zhou could directly use the holy stone to speak. He could directly control those poison people. There must be other changes. Gong Yimo couldn't help but look at the other party's head. Gong Dai let Lo Chi go forward and open the other party's skull. To be honest, when they were young, Gong Dai wanted to verify whether what royal sister said was true. After he took over Zhao prison, he opened up many corpses. But the moment Jin Zhou's skull was opened up, Gong Dai subconsciously covered royal sister's eyes. Because this scene was really too creepy. In the cerebral cortex, there was a huge dead worm. It definitely wasn't that big in the beginning. Who knew how long it had lived in Jin Zhou's brain for it to grow to such a terrifying size? Kim Yoon couldn't hold it in and ran out to vomit. Gong Yimo didn't know what was going on, but she understood that they must have seen something terrifying. She couldn't help but tremble as she spoke. "What's wrong?" Gong Yi paused for a moment before his cold voice rang out. "There's a huge flesh worm in his cerebral cortex, but it's already dead." Gong Yimo subconsciously trembled. Luckily, she didn't see it. This was obviously some kind of parasitic worm. Although she didn't understand medicine, she knew that if there was a foreign object in the brain, it would have a huge impact on the person. For example, the person's mind would degenerate, nervous system would weaken, headache, easily angry and irritable, just like a wild beast. Wait, she seemed to have thought of something. Although I don't know why only animals can make the sacred stone speak. But Jin Zhou, it's like someone is suppressing his thoughts. In short, he is slowly turning into an animal. Could this be the reason why he didn't fall asleep after taking the sacred stone? Because the sacred stone doesn't think he's a human, but an animal? This was a lot easier to explain. In a sense, Jin Zhou had already become an existence similar to the little monkey. But when the little monkey used the sacred stone to speak, It was relaying a person's command. It didn't have any consciousness. Jin Zhou was different. He had the sacred stone in his body, so he could connect with other poisoned people. He also had his own thoughts, so he could resonate with these poisoned people and become their leader. The command he gave was directly from his own body. In other words, he had turned into a sacred stone with his own consciousness. Those poisoned people who were unconscious were within his range of influence. Naturally, they would attack wherever he wanted them to. No wonder Sure Xion's command didn't have any effect. Chapter 696. However, Kim Yoon did not answer. Not to mention whether he could find that kind of goo or not. This method of turning people into beasts and feeding them with brain blood was too cruel. The room suddenly became quiet. Gong Yimo suddenly said faintly, "I'm afraid it's useless." Although they are using the Holy Stone as a medium to transmit information, a certain messenger and Jin Zhou have the same heart goo. The transmission of information between them is likely to be a designated transmission. Outsiders won't be able to receive it. This feeling was like everyone used to use a walkie-talkie in the past. But suddenly, some people had a number and could make a designated call so that others couldn't eavesdrop on the content. Then there's no way to deal with them? Kim Yoon had a headache. It seems like we can only use the old method from last time. Just like Jin Zhou's command, Monkey can still receive it. We can use this method to monitor them at any time and prevent them from doing bad things. But as time passed, there was no movement from the other side. Little Monkey did not receive any news and seemed to be trembling with fear. Could it be that people like Jin Zhou have achieved the ability to directly control the poisoned without the use of the Holy Stone? Gong Dai coldly looked at Little Monkey and said, "Impossible." Gong Yimo shook her head. How can it be so heaven-defying? Didn't Little Monkey receive the news last time? Generally, when there's no need to move, it may only need the brain to send a simple command. But for some more complicated attacks, it can't be separated from the Holy Stone. After all of this happened because of this broken stone. Gong Yimo touched her chin and guessed, they haven't made a move for so long. Perhaps they're preparing for a big wave? Just when everyone was at their wits' end, Yu Heng welcomed another distinguished guest, Si Wuyan. This year's New Year would be very lively. The leaders of 3 major countries gathered together. Could there be anything more grand than this? Everyone was waiting at the palace gates to welcome the guests. They saw an extremely luxurious carriage slowly approaching. Gong Dai had brought 1,000 elites with him, but Si Wuyan was different. He also had 1,000 people behind him, but each of them was holding something precious in their hands. If one didn't know, they would think that they were bringing birthday gifts. The curtain was lifted. His red robe seemed to glow in such a gloomy winter. He did not tie up his hair, and his black hair was loose. He had an indescribable charm. Si Wuyan. Gong Yimo greeted him with a smile. His eyes lit up, but when he saw Gong Dai, his face darkened. He looked at Gong Yimo's stomach and said exaggeratedly, "Wow, your stomach is so big. Your Highness is quite fast." Gong Yimo subconsciously looked at her stomach. She couldn't tell if it was good or not. She looked behind him. Why don't I see Shang Mingxi? Si Wuyan slowly got down from the carriage. He said in annoyance, "Of course he has to help me deal with the country's affairs. How can he run around?" Gong Yimo nodded. Shang Mingxi is so pitiful. Si Wuyan walked in front of her and looked her up and down. He suddenly said, "I'm also very pitiful. I finally took a fancy to the Empress, but someone else beat me to it." Before Gong Yimo could say anything, she was pulled behind Gong Dai. "Yu Qijuan, please have some self-respect." Si Wuyan was not Kim Yoon. He raised his brows. His red robe and black eyes seemed to be piercing. The one who needs to have self-respect is the regent. You should know that the girl behind you is not married yet. Gong Yimo was a little confused, but the 2 men were about to collide. She has this prince's child in her stomach. When the time comes, there will be double happiness. Why not? Si Wuyan raised his brows. Double happiness? Bringing the child to marry someone else seems to be double happiness too. Not only will you get a wife, you will also get a child for free. Gong Dai's expression darkened when he heard that. The already snowy weather seemed to have turned even colder. However, Si Wuyin was a troublemaker. He dared to provoke anyone and was not worried about the consequences at all. He had already forgotten all of Shang Mingxi's instructions before he came here. Kim Yun saw that the situation was not good and quickly stepped forward. Yuqijuan, Regent, this is not a good place to reminisce. This prince has already prepared a banquet. Shall we? After he stepped in with a smile, Si Wuyin still gave Kim Yun face and was the first to look away. After he looked Kim Yun up and down, he sighed in his heart. What a dragon among men. Then he glanced at Gong Yimo. Everything was ruined by this little vixen. Gong Yimo felt wronged. The group returned to the palace again, and the atmosphere was quite strange. Gong Yimo's nerves were relatively thick, so she didn't feel anything while eating and drinking. However, when the three men were together, the atmosphere gradually changed. For example, even though they were seriously talking about the goo poison, the atmosphere gradually changed. I heard that Gong Yimo jumped off a cliff and was poisoned some time ago. It seems that someone is very incompetent. Gong Dai saw that Si Wuyin was implying something and snorted coldly. Yuqijuan, you don't have to worry about it. This prince and Immerse's relationship is stronger than gold. It's useless to try to sow discord. Si Wuyin then said to Kim Yun, Gong Yimo is your sister after all. Are you just going to watch her meet a bad man? Before Kim Yun could say anything, Gong Yimo whispered, No, Gong Dai is quite good. In the main hall, Si Wuyin looked at Gong Yimo with disappointment. No wonder people say that pregnancy will make you stupid. Because of him, you've suffered so much and suffered so much. You even sided with him wholeheartedly. Chapter 697. Gong Dai licked Gong Yimo's lips and reluctantly let go. I don't care. At most, I'll bring royal sister back to my country and we'll go our separate ways. Gong Dai's words were undoubtedly a threat to Si Wuyin and Kim Yun. Daiyu State had a strong government, but they didn't. In terms of ability and strength, they actually needed Gong Dai more than Gong Dai needed them. Everyone instantly had different thoughts. Seeing that they didn't speak, Gong Yimo couldn't help but punch Gong Dai. She smiled awkwardly and said, The four countries are bound together for good or ill. Gong Dai was just saying it out of anger. Besides, Si Wuyin, can't you speak nicely? Si Wuyin turned his head away angrily. No. Kim Yun also smiled and helped to smooth things over. Speaking of which, this is Yuheng's problem. I'm very grateful to have troubled the regent and Yuqijuan to help. I'd like to propose a toast to the regent and Yuqijuan. I hope that you can work together to fight against the enemy. Si Wuyin snorted, but still tilted his head back and drank the wine. Gong Dai smiled coldly and drank the wine as well. Seeing that the two of them had finally gone with the flow, Kim Yun said to Si Wuyin, Speaking of which, I have a lot of things to trouble Yuqijuan. The parasite we're facing now is very complicated, and there's no antidote. My dungeon is full of poison people. They're all citizens of Yuheng. Yuqijuan, please save them. Si Wuyin narrowed his eyes and said, If there's poison, there's an antidote. I'm not good at other things, but I'm good at using poison. Kim Yun was overjoyed. That's great. Thank you, Yuqijuan. Gong Yimo said, I'm afraid it won't be that easy. The goo poison itself is very difficult to detoxify, and the other party even changed the goo poison. Obviously, the other party also has a poison expert. Si Wuyin's expression changed slightly. After thinking for a while, he said, After I received the letter from the Prince Regent, I had my suspicions. Before I came here, I received accurate news that Dong Wani had gone missing. She poisoned the man who loved her wholeheartedly and left Yuqi. Everyone's expression turned solemn. Looks like the other party's helper is her. Not bad. Gong Yimo still wanted to say something, but suddenly, an ear-piercing scream was heard. Her head hurt. It turned out that it was that monkey. He didn't know when it had leaped into the hall. Its cries gave Gong Yimo a headache. Gong Dai was shocked and immediately glared at him. The little monkey, who had been unable to control itself, strangely shut its mouth. Then, he was caught by Lo Chi, who was chasing after him. At the same time, he also stuffed her mouth. He knelt down. "Your Highness, this subordinate has failed in his duty. This monkey suddenly ran here like crazy." But how could Gong Dai pay attention to him at this moment? All his attention was on Gong Yimo. "Are you all right?" Just now, when Gong Yimo screamed, Si Wuyin and Kim Yun came over. Even if they didn't get along well with Gong Dai, they only had gratitude towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo's face was pale. She suddenly spoke intermittently in Gong Dai's arms. "Oh no, I heard it. Someone is giving the order to attack the East Gate." Jin Yun was shocked when he heard this. The East Gate has the most people. Is this true? Although Gong Dai pitted Gong Yimo's current situation, he still took the time to refute. "It's true. Royal Sister can understand the message from the Holy Stone." Kim Yun didn't doubt him anymore. He quickly got up and ordered people to bring 10,000 people to suppress the East Gate. One of Kim Yun's men quickly took Kim Yun's token and went to gather the troops. Gong Yimo was sent to the soft couch in the side chamber because of her headache. A few people surrounded her. Seeing her pale face, they couldn't help but ask Gong Dai what was going on. Gong Dai's face was gloomy. He wanted to strangle that monkey to death. However, Gong Yimo calmed down and said faintly, "Because I'm also poisoned." Everyone knew this, but when they saw that she was no different from an ordinary person, they forgot about it. "Jin Zhou and those people can't directly control me because I'm more advanced than them. So I can also use the little monkey to understand their orders. This is also considered cheating." She smiled and suddenly said to Gong Dai, "I see that they have a large number of people. In order to end the battle quickly, 10,000 people are not enough. Gong Dai, can you go to the East Gate to help them?" Gong Dai shook his head. "I can't leave you in your current state." "It's okay," Gong Yimo said. "We still have 1,000 elites here. I'm fine. You go quickly to avoid any more trouble." Kim Yun saw that Gong Yimo was serious and said, "Regent, I'll give you another 5,000 people. But I hope that during the suppression process, you can try to capture them alive." Gong Dai frowned impatiently. Gong Yimo patted his hand. "I'm letting you go because I hope you can capture the controller alive and hand it over to Si Wuyin for research. We can't always be so passive." Gong Dai frowned and got up, looking at her worriedly. "Then you rest here. I'll come back as soon as possible." With that, he looked at Lo Chi seriously. "I'll allow you to redeem yourself and protect the royal sister well." "Yes, Your Highness." Gong Yimo weakly raised her head and watched Gong Dai leave. Kim Yun and Si Wuyin were a bit embarrassed to stay here. Instead, it was Si Wuyin who spoke. "Is the situation so serious now? Where did they get so many people to attack the city gate?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "I'm not sure. But from the information I heard, there are many people." Kim Yun comforted her. "It's okay. We have a lot of people. Even if they have a lot of people, it's not enough. It's just that people will inevitably die." Gong Yimo didn't know how to comfort him. At this time, Luo Xiaoqi suddenly ran over. "Princess, not good. That monkey is shouting again." When Lo Chi heard this, he prepared to let the monkey bring them to look for people like last time. "But that would be too troublesome," Gong Yimo said. "Just bring it here directly." "But wouldn't that give the princess a headache again?" "There's no time to dilly-dally. Bring it here." With her loud voice, Lo Chi still obeyed. Kim Yun said worriedly, "Is this okay? You seem to feel terrible when you hear those sounds." Gong Yimo rubbed her forehead. "I have a feeling that their sudden move is not that simple. We don't have so much time to waste." The monkey was quickly brought over. Its voice was sharp, making people who heard it feel like there was a taut string buzzing. Gong Yimo only felt like someone was holding a small hammer in her head and hammering it nonstop. Her eyes instantly turned red. In the end, Gong Yimo waved her hand while sweating profusely. Lo Chi hurriedly covered the monkey's mouth. Gong Yimo's face turned even paler. Her expression was puzzled. Westgate is also an enemy." Kim Yun suddenly stood up. "I'll go suppress them." This sudden appearance of the enemy in the imperial city put his people in danger. As the emperor of Yuheng, he couldn't just sit and wait for death. Chapter 698. No. Gong Yimo covered her head and shook her head. You can't go. Their target is you. They want to control you to achieve their goal of controlling Yuheng. If you go out, won't you fall into their trap? But Gong Yimo cut him off firmly and said to Lo Qi, quickly bring 500 elites to assist Yuheng in suppressing them. If possible, try to keep the controllers alive. Lo Qi refused. His Highness has given the order. I can't leave the princess. Gong Yimo glared at him. Even your master listens to me. How dare you disobey? Go quickly. Otherwise I'll have a headache again. Lo Qi was conflicted. He had no choice but to agree. Kim Yun said, I'll send generals to go with you. He has 10,000 men who can help you. Thank you. Luo Qi hurriedly said, I don't dare. But please be sure to protect our princess. Kim Yun nodded. I won't let her be in any danger. Soon, Lo Qi and Kim Yun's men deployed the troops. The people in the room gradually decreased, but the atmosphere became more and more oppressive. Gong Yimo also felt uneasy and said to Kim Yun, Brother Kim Yun, we still have 5,000 imperial guards, right? Let them guard the palace gates well. Although those people probably can't break in, it's still better to be prepared. As she spoke, she covered her head with her hands in pain. Kim Yun comforted her and said sternly, Immerse, don't worry. I'll go deploy the troops now. If you have a headache, have a good rest. Yu Qijuan, help check on Immerse. Her headache is too strange. Si Wuyin nodded. Go deploy the troops. I'll take a look at her. Kim Yun nodded and left in a hurry. Si Wuyin frowned and suddenly said, It's my first day here. Why did so many things happen? Gong Yimo obediently let him take her pulse. Because you're a jinx. Si Wuyin raised his eyebrows angrily. Do you believe that I will make your head hurt even more? Gong Yimo sighed. You can't be so cruel, right? Si Wuyin snorted and carefully checked her pulse. However, this was not an illness. He could not see anything from her pulse. He thought for a moment and gave Gong Yimo some of his self-made sobering pills so that she could have a good rest. It's so chaotic outside. How can I sleep? Gong Yimo shook her head. Si Wuyin smiled. This thing can help you sleep. Don't worry, you'll feel better after you wake up. Not long after he finished speaking, Gong Yimo fell asleep. Si Wuyin sat beside her and gradually felt a little restrained. After all, he came this time because of Gong Yimo's face. Perhaps there was no other relationship between them, but that did not stop him from getting close to her and sharing her burdens. Secondly, this sudden enemy seemed to be unfathomable. He was worried that it would implicate Yuheng, so he took action in advance to help Yuheng. However, at this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside. Si Wuyin was a little puzzled. Seeing that Gong Yimo was gradually falling asleep, he left some of the shadow guards beside him and got up to go out to see what was going on. Gong Yimo seemed to be asleep, but also did not seem to be. In her dream, she seemed to hear someone calling her and ordering her to do something. However, the voice was too weak. She could completely block it when she was awake, but she heard it when she was asleep. It made her very uncomfortable. How could she be controlled? Gong Yimo struggled to break free from the restraints and suddenly opened her eyes. However, she heard a lot of noise outside. She was asleep? How long had she been asleep? Gong Yimo looked around and found that Kim Yun and Si Wuyin were not there. Strange, didn't Big Brother Kim Yun go to deploy the defense? He should be back soon. Why was he nowhere to be seen? And Si Wuyin? He did not know martial arts and could not help with the matters outside. Why was he missing? Gong Yimo got up curiously. When she opened the door, the noise became even louder, and her door was actually surrounded by people. Lo Qi had left with 500 elites, but the remaining 500 people actually spontaneously surrounded her door. What's going on? Gong Yimo was still very dignified. Seeing that she was awake, Luo Xiaoqi stepped forward to report. He was usually cheerful, but at this moment, his expression was very serious. Princess, it seems that someone has broken into the palace. His Majesty Yuheng has already brought people to suppress them. Nothing will happen. When Gong Yimo heard that Kim Yun had personally gone, she frowned and quickly prepared to go. However, she was stopped by Luo Xiaoqi. He said with some embarrassment, His Highness ordered that if there is chaos, we must keep an eye on you and protect your safety. What about the others? Luo Xiaoqi did not speak, but his meaning was very clear. Her safety was the most important thing. The others were not their concern. Gong Yimo sighed. Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold. If something happens to Yuheng, Daiyu State will not be spared. Let me out. No. He still wanted to insist, but Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. The sudden deterrence made Luo Xiaoqi tremble. How could he forget that the person he was facing was not some weak princess? She was the crown prince, the princess of Fenggue Rongjigu State, who was personally conferred by the former emperor. How could he control her? I will give you two choices. 1. I defeat you and you go out. 2. You come with me and listen to my orders. Luo Xiaoqi hesitated for a moment, but the other party's aura was getting stronger and stronger. He could not withstand the pressure and could only say this. We will follow you. Very good. Gong Yimo hurried out and asked, Where is Si Wuyan? Why is he not here? Luo Xiaoqi quickly said, His Majesty saw that there were enemies at all 4 gates. He was afraid that the 5,000 garrison troops would not be able to hold them off. He said that he developed a kind of bone-softening powder that can numb the muscles and bones, so he went to the side palace gate to help His Majesty Yuheng. The situation was so urgent? Gong Yimo asked again. There are people guarding the east and west gates. Why are there people poisoned in the city? Speaking of this, Luo Xiaoqi was also a little surprised. Someone opened the prison gate. These people all escaped from the dungeon. Gong Yimo could not help but knock her head. She was too careless. When those people were captured, she and Kim Yun did not say that they were going to kill them. She did not expect that things would go wrong at the most critical moment. Could it be that this was premeditated by the enemy? If that was the case, the mastermind behind this was too scary. When Gong Yimo hurried to the side palace gate, it had not been broken through by the enemy yet. However, the situation was very serious when she heard the noisy roars outside. There were more than 3,000 poison people in the city. They were all fearless, and the 5,000 garrison troops were scattered around the palace gate. It was unlikely that they would be able to hold them off for long. Now, she could only hope that Gong Dai could come back soon. It was impossible to capture them alive. In this case, the only way to relieve the pressure was to kill those poison people. Otherwise, if more and more poison people were caught in the city, who knew what terrible consequences they would bring in the chaos? Chapter 699. Soon, Gong Yimo saw Si Wuyan. He was dressed in red and was standing on the wall of the side palace gate. He was sprinkling a fine white powder. Below him were the poisoned people who were crazily smashing the door. They were all moving in a regular and planned manner. They were extremely strong. 1,000 soldiers were on standby. Their mission was to guard this door. How is it? Gong Yimo quickly went forward and asked. Si Wuyan was shocked to see her. Why are you awake? We don't need you here. You're pregnant. Go back and wait for the news. He was a little flustered because the situation was really serious. He didn't want Gong Yimo to be hurt. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. Are you looking down on me? Si Wuyan shook his head with a headache. No, I'm here. There won't be a problem, although these people are really difficult to deal with. He looked at the hundreds of people below the side palace gate with lingering fear. I just fought with them. I found that not only are their fighting strength amazing, but they also don't feel pain. They are not afraid of death, so I had to retreat and guard the palace gate. They seem to have planned it. They attacked from different gates. Yuheng is guarding the main palace gate. I heard that there are more enemies there. Gong Yimo said in surprise when she saw that the people below seemed to be attacking less fiercely. Your powder seems to be effective on them. Si Wuyan nodded. So, I'm fine here. I have experts protecting me. There are more than 1,000 soldiers here to help me. I'm safe. You don't have to worry. Go back. Gong Yimo thought for a moment and said, Do you have an antidote for this powder? If I accidentally touch it, won't I be poisoned? Si Wuyan frowned. Go back and stay there. How can you touch it? Although he said that, he still gave her the antidote and urged her impatiently. Go. Gong Yimo glared at him. She still asked Luo Xiaoqi to leave 100 people here to help Si Wuyan. She didn't go back, but went to the main palace gate instead. The sky was gloomy and seemed to be preparing for a heavy snow. Gong Yimo heard a shout from afar. Then, a person covered in blood fell at her feet. Princess. This palace person obviously knew Gong Yimo. However, his face was covered in blood, so Gong Yimo couldn't recognize him. Don't go. The main palace gate. The main palace gate is broken. Gong Yimo was shocked and quickly pulled him up. She asked anxiously, Where's Kim Yoon? Where's your majesty? He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he fainted because of his injuries. Gong Yimo had no choice but to hand him over to the person behind her. She sped up and ran forward. His Highness Princess, since the city gate has been breached, let's retreat. After all, nothing's princess's princess. Gong Yimo didn't seem to hear his words. She ran faster and faster toward the main palace gate. In the process, more and more palace people escaped with injuries. Occasionally, there were some poisoned people. They wore prison uniforms and ran toward them, but they were all killed by Luo Xiaoqi's people. Seeing that the gate was getting closer and closer, the screams became louder and louder. When she was about to reach the main palace gate, she saw that the gate was wide open and the ground was covered in blood. There were still many guards at the gate stubbornly resisting, but they were obviously no match for those poisoned people. After those poisoned people caught them, they tore and bit them. They were so fierce as if they wanted to kill everyone in sight. The chaos, the screams, and the corpses on the ground made Gong Yimo's pupils shrink. Suddenly, endless hatred surged in her heart. She tried so hard to avoid a war, but there were always people stirring up trouble. She didn't want anyone to die, but some people just didn't care about other people's lives for their own selfish reasons. Seeing Gong Yimo's eyes turn red, Luo Xiaoqi was also very angry. He quickly ordered people to join in the battle to help. The 5,000 garrison troops were scattered to the 4 palace gates. There was not much left. The corpses on the ground and the garrison troops who were still resisting the poisoned people made them admire them. And those who were originally ordinary people were now like ferocious beasts. All their pity disappeared. Cruel and bloodthirsty. Inhumane. They just wanted to tear these madmen into pieces. Gong Yimo closed her eyes. She was wrong. She shouldn't be soft-hearted. These poisoned people were time bombs. She should have killed them all long ago. Moreover, she was likely to fall into the enemy's trap. Were there really so many enemies? In such a short time, even if there were unknown enemies, it was impossible for them to attack the east and west gates at the same time. Maybe they were just luring the tiger away from the mountain and deliberately gave her the wrong information. No, it shouldn't be completely wrong. There must be enemies at the east gate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to delay Gong Dai. But it might not be the case at the west gate. Lo Qi and his people went smoothly, but when they found out it was a trap, it was very difficult for them to come back. Because the dungeon was at the west gate, when these prisoners were released from the dungeon, they must have deliberately disturbed the order of the city and caused panic. Now the city was probably full of screams. Lo Qi and his 10,000 people wanted to go through the city and come back, but it wouldn't be easy. Luo Xiaoqi, send someone to inform Lo Qi. When he comes back, don't let him enter the palace. Take people to surround the 4 palace gates. Don't let a bird out. Yes. Luo Xiaoqi quickly sent someone to pass the order. Gong Yimo said again. You take the rest of the people here to clear the palace gates and kill all these intruders. Be sure to ensure the safety of most of the palace people. Gong Yimo's voice was slightly unbearable, but it was more determined. If they didn't kill them now, the consequences would be more serious. Princess, what about you? Luo Xiaoqi didn't want to leave her. After all, the princess's safety was the most important. But now he had to listen to her order. After all, when the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. Their target is Kim Yoon. I have to save him. In short, she wouldn't let them succeed. After hesitating, Luo Xiaoqi could only agree and join the battle. Gong Yimo plunged into the depths of the palace to look for someone. The city gate had been broken. If Kim Yoon retreated with his people, he should go to the main hall. But when she arrived at the main hall, she only saw corpses on the ground. There was no Kim Yoon at all. When she hurried past the threshold, a guard suddenly grabbed her foot. Gong Yimo was shocked. She looked down and saw that the man was vomiting blood. Obviously, he had suffered a serious internal injury. She quickly squatted down. How are you? Then she took out a rejuvenation pill from her space to feed him. But he shook his head and struggled to point in a direction. Please, princess, save me. Before he could finish his words, he died with his eyes wide open. The pill was crushed by Gong Yimo's hand. At this moment, the anger in her heart was unparalleled. The murderous aura was spreading. She hadn't been so angry for a long time. Chapter 700. She glanced at the guard who died in front of her, and then glanced at the mess in the main hall. She took a deep breath and ran towards the direction the guard pointed at. She took out a hidden sword from her space. Her eyes were like lightning, like an unsheathed sword. The smell of blood still disgusted her, but her anger suppressed her disgust. She only wanted to find out who was controlling them. Cut them into pieces. She guessed that there should be at least 2 other people controlling Jinzhou. One should be at the east gate, entangling Gong Dai. The other one should be in the palace, trying to catch Kim Yoon. If she wanted to control these poison people, she couldn't be too far away. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to catch Jinzhou last time. He could hide and not show himself. In other words, other than those poison people wearing prison uniforms, there was still a leader in the palace. She just needed to kill him. Those prisoners were much easier to deal with. The pavilions had lost their former peace and elegance. There were screams and chasing figures everywhere. The person controlling them obviously wanted to mess up the entire palace and take advantage of the situation. Gong Yimo didn't show any mercy. Seeing a crazy person, she would cut them with her sword. She would directly cut off their heads. Soon, more and more people died in her hands. However, she still didn't see Kim Yoon's figure. She became more and more anxious. Could it be that he had been captured by those people? Gong Yimo's gorgeous palace dress was stained with blood. The sky began to snow again. The cold and bleak intertwined with the bloodthirsty killing intent. She looked at the 2 prisoners rushing towards her. She twisted her neck and raised her sword to kill. The snow was getting heavier and the sky was getting darker. Gong Yimo felt that she had killed at least a few hundred people. She saved a lot of palace people. Every time she saved one, she would let them lead the other palace people to hide in the harem. Kim Yoon's harem was empty, so it was the safest place to go. She gradually gathered the palace people who were running around. However, she asked a lot of people along the way. They didn't see Kim Yoon. The palace was so big. Where did he go? Gong Yimo anxiously jumped onto the roof of the main hall. With a light tap of her toes, she stood at the tip of the eaves and looked down. The chilly wind blew, causing her robes to flutter loudly. Her black hair fluttered, and her red lips were slightly pursed. She was indescribably ferocious. Don't panic. Kim Yoon had many people protecting him, so it would not be easy for the other side to take him down. Moreover, the other side only had 3,000 people, and they were spread out to the 4 city gates. Kim Yoon would only face 1,000 or so people. Excluding those who had died, the number of people she had killed was even lower. And the controller should be near Kim Yoon, chasing after Kim Yoon. Within the bleak palace, Kim Yoon retreated step by step. Outside, there were sounds of desperate fighting. The prisoners did not use weapons and relied solely on their physical strength. It was extremely difficult to kill them. So even though Kim Yoon had the advantage in numbers, he did not have the upper hand. This was the Cold Palace, and it was also the place Kim Yoon was most familiar with. There was a secret room here that he could hide in, just in case. However, the other side suddenly attacked with irresistible force and caught him off guard. He retreated step by step and was finally blocked here. Immerse was right. These people had come for him because only by capturing him would they be able to take complete control of Alioth. Alioth was situated between the two kingdoms, and it was their most ideal base. So this time, they disregarded the consequences and spared no expense as they moved out in full force. However, as long as he was alive and not captured by the other side, they would not lose. Unfortunately, he was too slow and was intercepted in the end. Jin Yun's heart ached as he listened to the incessant wails. Because of his benevolence, so many people died in exchange. If it were Gong Dai, he would definitely kill those poisoned people right away, right? Thinking of this, Kim Yoon raised his head with some pain and looked at the woman in front of him. Imperial Grandmother, I admit that I have treated you well. You are also a citizen of Yuheng. Your brothers and father are all in Yuheng. Do you know that your actions will bring disaster to your entire family? The woman in front of him was very thin and did not look old. However, her hair was completely white and her eyes were very fierce. That fierceness was not only because of her hatred for Kim Yoon. It was also because she was becoming less and less human. Her movements were nimble and her body was bent, making her look more and more like a monkey. One could imagine that the goo worm in her brain was growing bigger and bigger. Kim Yoon, no matter how glib your tongue is, you will not escape from my hands today. You stole my son's throne and allowed your bitch to kill my son. You harmed my grandson. Do you think that by sparing our lives, we will be grateful to you? Dream on. Even if I die, I will drag you to hell with me. The only one who could be called Imperial Grandmother by Kim Yoon was the Grand Empress Dowager. Jin Zhou's mother was her niece, so she only recognized Jin Zhou as her grandson. After the previous emperor died, Kim Yoon killed Jin Zhou's mother but let her live. He did not mistreat her maternal family. Who would have thought that she would stab him in the back at the crucial moment? Kim Yoon covered the wound on his arm with a grave expression. At this time, Gong Yimo did not find Kim Yoon. Instead, she saw Lo Chi. Lo Chi saw that Gong Yimo was fine and let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 701. Stop your futile resistance. If you had taken Yun Jin's soup the last time, this wouldn't have happened. Do you want more people to suffer? Aren't you known as a benevolent ruler? How can you be a benevolent ruler when you don't care about the lives of others for your own sake? At that moment, Kim Yoon was really persuaded. If the other party stopped after he took the medicine, what did it matter if he disobeyed her and died from the heart being drilled? The old lady saw Kim Yoon's struggling expression and approached him step by step. She didn't have much time to waste. If that little bitch Gong Yimo came, wouldn't all her efforts be for naught? Hence, she had the intention to use force right from the start and sealed off all of Kim Yoon's escape routes. Come, eat it. Otherwise, more and more people outside will die. She walked closer and closer. Finally, the two of them were only one step apart. All right, I'll take it. Kim Yoon seemed to have finally compromised. He took the medicine with one hand and reached for a vase behind him with the other. Old hag, this is the first time I've seen someone who doesn't want to lead a good life and is rushing to die. Gong Yimo's angry voice was heard. She broke through the window and ignored the people outside who were busy killing each other. She charged toward the old lady like she was breaking through an army of 10,000 soldiers. The moment the old lady heard her voice, she instinctively wanted to use Kim Yoon as a shield. Jin Yun's movements were also very fast. He smashed the vase on the other party's head. Blood flowed and the old lady's head seemed to be in severe pain. Something even caused a bump to form on her forehead. How did Gong Yimo find her so quickly? Damn it! At that moment, She couldn't care less about holding on to Kim Yoon and jumped out of another window. Gong Yimo wasn't in a hurry to chase after her. Instead, she asked Kim Yoon, "Are you all right?" Kim Yoon shook his head. "I'm fine. Go after her." Gong Yimo hesitated for a moment. "Lo Chi will be here soon. Be careful." Kim Yoon nodded. The other party had mobilized all their forces, but this was Yu Heng's empire. He wouldn't just give it up like that. "Imoer, I'll have to trouble you. As long as you kill her, those intruders will have no leader. I'll take care of them." Gong Yimo nodded. "All right. I'm going to kill her now. Take care of yourself." "Yes." Gong Yimo also jumped out of the window, while Kim Yoon hastily bandaged his wound and walked out. The constant shouting and killing in the courtyard caused a trace of viciousness to appear on his usually calm face. The old woman seemed to have walked a little too far away, causing the originally ferocious prisoners to slow down. They scattered in all directions, as if they wanted to escape just like the old woman. But how could Kim Yoon give them a chance? In the end, it was still his fault for being too soft-hearted. "Your Majesty." Many people saw that the emperor was fine, and their confidence was greatly boosted. Some who were originally exhausted suddenly felt energized. Kim Yoon covered his wound. His expression was unprecedentedly cold. "Everyone, listen to my orders. Reinforcements are coming. Take advantage of the victory and pursue them. You must kill all the intruders here." "Yes," many people replied. Once they heard that reinforcements were coming, their physical strength seemed to increase. Coupled with the fact that the prisoners had scattered, their confidence was greatly boosted and they chased after them. The situation was smoothly reversed. With Kim Yoon around, the garrison became more confident and had a backbone. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before these intruders were dealt with. Gong Yimo shuttled through the palace and encountered fewer and fewer prisoners. However, her abdomen was in pain. Clearly, it was the result of exercising too much. Baby. At this critical moment, Mom can only let you down." At this moment, a prisoner suddenly jumped out from behind the rockery. He fiercely pounced on Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo narrowly avoided it. Just as she was about to slash down, a murderous aura suddenly appeared behind her. Following that was a sharp scream. When Gong Yimo turned around, she felt a sharp pain in her head. In a daze, she saw the old witch attacking her. Oh no! However, in this situation, Gong Yimo only had time to move her body to avoid being stabbed in her vital parts. The knife was about to pierce through Gong Yimo's chest. The old witch's ferocious face revealed a trace of a victorious smile. If she could not capture Kim Yoon, capturing Gong Yimo would be a great achievement. She did not realize that she had completely become someone else's lackey. It was not the so-called cooperative relationship that they had previously discussed. However, in the next second, she flew out like a broken kite and fell to the ground. No one knew if she was dead or alive. Gong Yimo fell into a warm embrace. However, the owner of the embrace was clearly flustered and exasperated. "Royal sister, what's the matter?" Gong Dai's voice was anxious and fast. He rarely lost his composure like this. In his heart, he was already chopping Lo Chi and Luo Xiaoqi into pieces. They were actually so disobedient. Gong Yimo secretly cursed. As her head was dizzy, she simply lay in Gong Dai's embrace and pretended to be weak. She immediately diverted the trouble away. "She used that annoying voice to provoke me. I can't just sit and wait for death." Gong Dai, who rushed back alone, could not tell whether she was telling the truth or not. However, his murderous gaze fell on the old woman who was gradually getting up. Gong Yimo seized the opportunity and said, "Gong Dai, I dare not get too close to her. You go and catch her and force her to control those prisoners who are running around in the palace, okay? Many people in the palace have died." "We can't add more casualties." Gong Dai also knew that the business was urgent, but the little thing in his arms was not obedient for a moment. "Then you stay quiet and wait for me. If you are disobedient again, I will." Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue. "I will be obedient." I promise I will be obedient. If there is a next time, I will be at your disposal. Gong Dai reluctantly let go of her. You must wait for me. Don't run around. Yes, yes, yes. Gong Yimo ran away quickly. Originally, she wanted to find a place to wait for Gong Dai. However, in the process of running, she suddenly thought of something. She quickly turned around and ran in the direction of Si Wuyan. If the other party sent out all their forces, this matter would not be so simple. After all, if they wanted to control Kim Yoon, they could do it at any time. Why did they have to do it when Si Wuyan came? The only possibility that Gong Yimo could think of was that Dong Wani was afraid of Si Wuyan's ability and did not want him to help them. Therefore, they wanted to make a move on Si Wuyan early. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. Gong Yimo immediately threw Gong Dai's words to the back of her mind and ran towards the side palace gate. Originally, this was just a guess. However, she did not expect that when she reached the side palace gate, a large number of people had already collapsed on the ground. The palace gate was wide open, as if it had been opened from the inside. The garrison soldiers on the ground did not have any injuries on their bodies. It was obvious that they had been poisoned by Si Wuyan's softening powder. However, there was no sign of Si Wuyan on the city wall. Gong Yimo was slightly surprised. She leaped onto the city gate and looked out. She saw that the ground outside was also covered with people who had collapsed. Other than the prisoners that Si Wuyan had taken down at the beginning, there were also the garrison soldiers that Lo Chi had assigned to guard the side palace gate. They had all been poisoned to the ground. Chapter 702. However, there was no sign of Si Wuyan on the city wall. Gong Yimo was slightly surprised. She leaped onto the city gate and looked outside. She saw that the ground outside was also covered with fallen people. Other than the prisoners that Si Wuyan had put down at the beginning, there were also the garrison troops that Lo Chi had assigned to guard the side gate. They had all been poisoned to the ground. So, Si Wuyan had been captured? Gong Yimo jumped off the city wall and looked at the traces on the ground. Her speed was already very fast. Even if Si Wuyan had been captured, he shouldn't have gone far. She could still catch up. In the carriage, Si Wuyan was tied up, but he didn't seem to feel it and spoke lazily. Now, the regent should have already ended the chaos in the East City. With his wisdom, his more than 10,000 subordinates must have been sent to guard the various city gates. You guys have caused such a commotion. Are you sure you still have people who can help you get out of the city? Mother? The only one that Si Wuyan called mother was naturally Dong Wani. He didn't expect her to come this time. They had really turned out in full force. Counting all the poison people and manipulators, this should be all the forces that those people had in Yuheng. Did they still have people they could use? Compared to before, Dong Wani was less aloof and superior. At this time, her whole body was wrapped in black gauze. Although her face was cold, it wasn't covered with blue veins. Obviously, there were no goo worms in her brain. Moreover, as a person who was proficient in the art of poison, she definitely wouldn't be affected by the goo of the same heart. Hearing Si Wuyan's words, she sneered and touched Si Wuyan's face. There is no one we can use. The people in Yuheng not only turned out in full force, but they also used up the goo poison in their hands. However, she smiled indifferently. What does it matter? Their target is the Emperor of Yuheng. My target is you. As long as we can catch one, today's losses will be worth it. After all, Si Wuyan was taught by her, so she was very afraid of him. She forced them to make a move as soon as possible, which led to today's chaos. Si Wuyan's knowledge of medicine and poison was not below her own. With his help in Yuheng, she might be able to neutralize her poison very quickly. Therefore, she had to take him away. But you don't have to do it yourself. Si Wuyan didn't seem to be afraid at all. He smiled lazily and said, "What's wrong? You don't have anyone to use now that you're no longer the Empress Dowager? He has to do everything by himself. How pitiful." Si Wuyan's words immediately made Dong Wani's face twist. She was originally the high and mighty Empress Dowager Yu Qi, but now she had been reduced to working with a group of shady people. All of this was because of Si Wuyan. No, It was all Gong Yimo's fault. It was all because of them. Yin'er, why do you have to belittle yourself? After all, I was the one who taught you. Other than me, who else can control you? After all, rare experts can only be found by chance. I could only come here personally. Si Wuyin narrowed his eyes. You make it sound nice. The feeling of a dignified Empress Dowager being reduced to a running dog isn't bad, right? Dong Wani suddenly reached out to touch his face. Did you forget how you served Aijia in the past? If I'm a running dog, what are you? Or do you want to relive the feeling of being a boy toy? As she said that, she smiled charmingly and touched his chest. Si Wuyin raised his brows slightly. A single red lip tasted by 10,000 people. How much more noble are you compared to a brothel matchmaker? Jean will just treat it as visiting a brothel and disgusting myself. So what? You. Dong Wani didn't expect that Si Wuyin was no longer the same as before. Under Gong Yimo's guidance, he had already completely let go of the past and was able to face his own past. The words that once made him stomp his feet, he could now stab back without batting an eyelid. Si Wuyin's mocking and ridiculing made Dong Wani lose her rationality. Moreover, she was naturally lustful. Otherwise, she wouldn't have kept so many male pets in the past. Seeing that Si Wuyin didn't know what was good for him, she didn't need to be polite with him. So she really tore his clothes. Since you don't care, why don't you let Aijia have a good taste? This body of yours was meticulously nourished by Aijia. It's rare to have such creamy skin. When Si Wuyin saw that Dong Wani was serious, he frowned in disgust and sneered. You're really naturally lustful. A woman like you can only be like that idiot Guanzai Jin. That's why he treats you like a treasure and wants to protect you even if he dies. Guanzai Jin was the one who made a deal with Gong Yimo. When Gong Yimo was in Yuqi, he said that as long as Gong Yimo agreed to let Dong Wani live, he would help her once. Later, Gong Yimo helped Si Wuyin win. She didn't kill Dong Wani and gave her to Guanzai Jin according to her promise. They thought that Dong Wani, who had nothing, wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Who knew that she would kill Guanzai Jin and work with the Shui clan to restore her former glory? When Guanzai Jin was mentioned, Dong Wani screamed as if she had been pricked by needles. What do you know? Guanzai Jin clearly said that he liked me, but he betrayed me and helped Gong Yimo. This is betrayal. He deserves to die. Si Wuyin shrugged. Say what you want. In any case, Jean is hard on you. No. Come. This was definitely the greatest humiliation to a woman. Dong Wani crazily tore at his clothes, laughing as she did so. Then who can you be hard on? Gong Yimo? How are you any better than me? Aren't you still thinking about other people's women? Si Wuyin's face sunk. At least Jean is not as shameless as you, chasing after others. Dong Wani wanted to say something, but suddenly, there was the sound of fighting outside. She tensed up and quickly pulled open the curtain to look outside. She saw the two people who were originally protecting her pouncing towards Gong Yimo. She had actually finished off that old witch so quickly. When Gong Yimo saw her, she couldn't help but mock her. I was wondering who it was, so it was you? I gave you a way out, but you didn't want to leave. Why did you insist on sending yourself to death? When she said this, Gong Yimo ruthlessly took care of the two people. That feeling of the thin blade cutting through the arteries, for a moment, it was very intoxicating. Seeing Gong Yimo, Dong Wani could no longer hide her hatred. If it wasn't for you, I would still be the high and mighty Empress Dowager. You took away everything from me, so I want you to live a life worse than death. Saying that, she actually stopped the horse carriage. At this moment, they were in a relatively spacious street, facing each other coldly. Gong Yimo raised her sword and slowly walked forward, but Dong Wani screamed, "Don't come over. If you come over again, I'll kill him." Needless to say, that him was definitely referring to Si Wuyin. The curtain at the back of the horse carriage was pulled open and Gong Yimo could clearly see that Si Wuyin was still alive, but he was tied up. Moreover, his clothes were disheveled, revealing his fair chest. His face was red from anger. Gong Yimo couldn't help but laugh. I was wondering why you were so angry. So it's because I've delayed you from snatching a common man. In broad daylight, in a horse carriage, is it really all right? Chapter 703. Dong Wani was furious that Gong Yimo had suddenly caught up to them when they were almost at the city gate. She was also afraid that Gong Yimo would bring a lot of people to surround them. She couldn't help but panic. When Si Wuyin heard Gong Yimo's words, he was so angry that his face turned even redder. Gong Yimo, what nonsense are you talking about? Gong Yimo smiled as she approached. I'm just telling the truth. Don't move. Otherwise, I'll really kill him. Dong Wani threatened angrily when she saw that the other party didn't seem to care about her at all. She pressed the dagger against Si Wuyin's neck even closer. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. Even if I don't move, you won't let him off, right? If you know what's good for you, then let him go. The city gate in front is already blocked. You won't be able to get out. Dong Wani suddenly sneered. That's not necessarily true. Almost at the same time, a panicked voice suddenly came from outside the western city gate. The ground began to tremble. This feeling made Gong Yimo frown. She suddenly had a bad premonition. She saw Dong Wani get someone to ride her horse out again. It was as if she was sure that she would be able to get out. Gong Yimo followed. To be honest, she had always been curious. Who would help Dong Wani? Today, these enemies had definitely turned out in full force. What other trump cards did the other party have? Therefore, she didn't chase after Dong Wani. Instead, she was one step ahead of her. She simply jumped up the city gate to see what was causing such a commotion. The moment she reached the city gate, she was shocked by the scene before her. In the vast expanse of whiteness, hundreds of black and red figures pierced through like a sword. The ones charging in from outside weren't people, but a large herd of cows. Gong Yimo suddenly recalled that Yuheng was a country that was half nomadic and half farming because it was located between Luyi and Dayu State. Therefore, the villages here had many cows and sheep. It was completely different from Dayu State, where each family only had a few pigs and one cow. Gong Yimo didn't notice this after the previous villages were breached. She didn't see any livestock and didn't care. She thought that the livestock had taken advantage of the chaos and ran away. Anyway, there weren't many of them. But only now did she know that those animals had been captured by the other party and used today. Gong Yimo suddenly realized that the person behind the scenes was an extremely smart person. Take one step and think many steps. First, he used the cheat that allowed him to hear their commands to turn the tables and use her to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Moreover, he used all his men on the edge of the blade. For example, if Gong Ju was at the east gate, he must send people to hold him back. Therefore, this person cannot be saved. Then, at the west gate, he could make a feint. Gong Yimo even felt that the reason why he had caused chaos everywhere and lured Kim Yoon to suppress them was to let Kim Yoon capture those poison people into the city and lock them in the dungeon. That was because he understood Kim Yoon's temperament and knew that he wouldn't kill. Then, at the critical moment, he would let those people in the dungeon give a fatal blow. In addition to the Golden Boat and the controlled Empress Dowager, it was obvious that the other party had not deployed them in the past few months, but had started deploying them a long time ago. It was just that in the past, they didn't have a large number of holy stones in their hands and had to plan slowly. Gong Dai also didn't give the order to kill them, allowing them to have space to survive and slowly plan. And now, Gong Dai's order to kill them gave them a sense of crisis. They had obtained a large number of holy stones, allowing them to make goo poison, which made them even more powerful. That was why they began to reveal their claws and fangs. They were so strong that they could even catch them off guard when they moved out in full force. Who was it? Who knew them so well? Who had planned this from a long time ago? And although the plan was risky, it was very thorough. Clearly, it wasn't something that Snow and those idiots could think of. Those bulls suddenly rushed towards the garrison. Furthermore, their eyes were red. It was obvious that they had taken some kind of drug that had stimulated their madness. However, they also rushed towards the garrison in an orderly manner. It was as if there was something on them that attracted them. Be careful. Seeing this, Gong Yimo wanted to raise her sword to save them, but she was shocked by the next scene. The sudden attack of the Mad Bulls caused the garrison outside the city gate to panic. They panicked and dodged, exposing the city gate to the bulls' eyes. Only then did Gong Yimo realize. The target of these Mad Bulls was not the garrison but the city gate. There must be something smeared on the city gate. That was why those bulls had become crazy. Those bulls were very fast, and after the garrison had dodged, they were like meatballs that smashed into the city wall. Bang, 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 bang. It was as if they did not know pain. Gong Yimo stood on the city wall and could hear the sound of the bulls' skulls breaking. It made one's scalp tingle. When a bull was killed, the ones behind immediately took its place, causing the city gate to tremble nonstop. The garrison inside the city felt as if their bodies were about to fall apart from the impact. Soon, they would not be able to hold on. That feeling of being attacked was endless. Even if they died, they did not retreat. This scene was too shocking. Gong Yimo was slightly dazed. And it was this moment of daze. The city gate was smashed open. The moment the gate was smashed open, the garrison inside the city could not help but scatter. Dong Luani took this opportunity to rush out. At this moment, the garrison inside and outside had scattered, and no one was blocking the road. Furthermore, the carriage was smeared with some kind of drug. When those Mad Bulls smelled it, they would avoid it. If they did not leave now, when would they leave? Gong Yimo originally wanted to leave Dong Luani behind, but this scene caused her to change her mind. She watched as Dong Luani left the city before sinking her chi into her dantian and shouting, "Everyone, stay away from the city gate." Gong Yimo's voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. The garrison originally wanted to run back to kill those Mad Bulls, but when they heard this voice, they subconsciously avoided it. They recognized that it was the princess's voice. Gong Yimo had been in Yuheng for a few years and had often acted together. Coupled with her iconic palace dress, they all chose to listen to her orders. The cold wind blew again, causing the snowflakes to fly diagonally. Below the city wall, after the Mad Bulls smashed open the city gate, they began to charge aimlessly. Seeing this, Gong Yimo directly took out a bomb. After igniting it, she placed it in different positions. Her figure moved like lightning. Then, an explosion suddenly sounded behind her. Gravel flew everywhere, mixed with the cries of the crowd. She acted as if she did not hear it and quickly moved forward. Everywhere she went, there was a continuous loud sound. Finally, the city wall fell outwards, blocking all the Mad Bulls outside. Next, she calculated that there were not many bulls that could break in alive, and without the city gate as bait, although they were manic, with the garrison in the city, they would not be able to do anything. Therefore, she did not stay any longer and directly chased outside. At this moment, her expression was dignified and the sword in her hand was held even tighter. She knew that the Snow Clan had hidden forces in the other 3 countries. But who was it? Who had such a strong control ability? Why did they not make a sound before, but now they were moving so frequently? She was really curious. Chapter 704. After Dong Luani rushed out, she ran wildly all the way. The garrison had long been stunned by the exploding figures and the collapsed city gates. They were unable to regain their senses for a long time. By the time they regained their senses, the other party was long gone. Dong Luani looked through the window. There were few people outside the city, so she could clearly see that Gong Yimo had chased after them alone. She didn't know if she was brave or not afraid of death. She smiled at Si Wuyin and said, "It seems that this princess still has feelings for you. She actually chased after you alone. I wonder how much merit I would get if I offered you and her together." Si Wuyin retorted sarcastically, "You still say you're not a lackey. You haven't even succeeded, and you're already thinking of taking credit? With such merit, Would the other party reward you with a horn? His words were harsh, but he was also vexed. Why did Gong Yimo chase after them alone? Dong Luani's expression turned ugly from his words. She pinched Si Wuyan's face and said angrily, "You're only good with that mouth of yours. Don't worry, when we get back, Aijia will properly dote on. Love, you?" As she spoke, she stuffed his mouth with a handkerchief. She laughed sinisterly. "It seems that which Yuheng has already failed. I'm afraid that trash Dongqing has also fallen into Gong Dai's hands. I'm the only one who has not only caught you, but also Gong Yimo, that slut." Gong Yimo guessed that the other party was going to her lair. She was thinking of a countermeasure when she saw the carriage stop in front of a forest. Her eyes flashed, and she walked towards the carriage step by step. Dong Luani lifted the curtain at the back of the carriage and smiled coldly at Gong Yimo. Her dagger was still firmly pressed against Si Wuyan's neck because Gong Yimo's martial arts were shocking. Even if she was alone, she couldn't be careless. "Princess, are you following me because you want to see the mastermind behind this?" Gong Yimo walked closer and finally stopped 10 steps away from the carriage. "No, I only want Si Wuyan. I'm not interested in that cowering person." Dong Luani smiled deeply. "Is that so? However, Si Wuyan is being held hostage by me. No matter how long you follow me, you won't be able to get him back." Gong Yimo shrugged. "That's why I'm trying to think of a way." Dong Luani narrowed her eyes. "Don't waste your energy. The miasma cloud forest is right in front of us. Without me, you won't be able to go there no matter how good your martial arts are." Gong Yimo saw that Si Wuyan was gagged and kept shaking his head at her. It could be seen that the forest in front of them was really dangerous. Gong Yimo had heard of the miasma cloud forest before. It was Yuheng's forbidden area. She didn't expect their nest to be here. The Empress Dowager stopped now because she suddenly wants to make a deal with me? Dong Luani smiled charmingly. Why not? If you're willing to give me a copy of the Jade Pendant, don't even talk about letting Si Wuyan go. I'll even tell you who the mastermind is. The miasma cloud forest was right in front of them, so Dong Luani felt that it was safe and wasn't in a hurry. Oh? Gong Yimo pretended to take out a cylinder from her sleeve. "You're talking about this?" Dong Luani's pupils shrank. It could be said that she was the first victim who was directly destroyed by the Jade Pendant. She hated this thing to the bone. If Gong Yimo didn't have the Jade Pendant, she would definitely be the winner of the Yuchi Rebellion. Originally, she only wanted to trick Gong Yimo and catch her. But when she saw the thing in her hand, her breathing became hurried. She didn't know whether it was hatred or fanaticism in her eyes. It wasn't that she didn't try to replicate it, but without a sample, it was impossible to replicate. If she had this in her hand, why would she cooperate with those people? She would be able to make a comeback soon. You come here." Because she was too agitated, Dong Luani's voice trembled a little. Si Wuyan frowned and whimpered, meaning to stop Gong Yimo from coming closer. But Gong Yimo didn't seem to hear as she walked closer to the horse carriage. The jade pendant in her hand was thrown up and caught again. She threw it up and caught it again, making Dong Luani's heart feel as if it was being thrown up and caught. The weather was cold, but Dong Luani didn't feel it at all. She was panting heavily as she watched Gong Yimo walk 3 steps away from the horse carriage. "I can give it to you. Anyway, you can't replicate it even if I give it to you. Then, do you want to hand over the person and hand over the item?" Gong Yimo deliberately provoked. It looked like a deal, but both sides had other intentions and were trying to deceive each other. Dong Luani narrowed her eyes. "Sure. When the horse carriage enters the forest, I will take Si Wuyan off the horse. Then, you can throw the jade pendant over. Once I get it, we will enter the forest and go our separate ways." Gong Yimo couldn't help but look past the horse carriage at the forest in front of them. It was shrouded in a faint white fog and snowflakes. It was quiet and didn't look scary at all. Dong Luani smiled lightly. "The poison in the miasma cloud forest will enter through the skin. You have to be quick later because Si Wuyan's body can't withstand the poison in the miasma cloud forest." "Okay, deal." Gong Yimo agreed readily. Dong Luani reluctantly looked at the jade pendant in her hand. When she looked at her again, a ray of light flashed across her eyes. Finally, She ordered the coachman to enter the forest. Gong Yimo looked at the horse carriage speeding into the forest. She smiled faintly and then looked at Dong Luani holding Si Wuyin down the horse carriage. When she walked into the forest, she smelled a strange fragrance. This forest was indeed strange. Chapter 705. After all, it was not a small matter if the jade heart fell into someone else's hands. Moreover, the jade heart in her hands must be real. Gong Yimo was not a prophet. Could it be that she had a fake jade heart on her? Dong Luani searched Gong Yimo's body and found nothing except for the soft sword. It was obvious that the only jade heart was the leftover from blowing up the city gate. She could not help but be completely relieved. She carefully hugged her chest, not knowing what she was thinking. After getting on the carriage, Si Wuyin's pale face gradually recovered its color. It was obvious that the thing on the carriage could not only avoid the Mad Bull, but also detoxify the miasma fragrance. This time, both of them were reduced to prisoners. Si Wuyin said exasperatedly, "Are you stupid? You came here alone. Do you still remember that you're more than 4 months pregnant?" Gong Yimo blinked innocently. "Isn't it because I'm afraid that you'll be eaten up and left with a psychological shadow? I'm sacrificing myself for justice, but you're not moved at all?" Seeing that Gong Yimo was still in the mood to bicker, Dong Luani could not help but ridicule. What a pair of lovers. Now that both of you can't move, you still have the mood to bicker. It seems that you don't know how powerful I am. Her eyes flashed with a poisonous light. Do you know why the goo poison can change its medicinal properties and make Shirsheen unable to control it? She smiled proudly. That's all my credit. Because I added a poisonous herb to the goo poison. It made the poisoned person's human consciousness fall into a deep sleep. They can only understand beast language and not human language. Gong Yimo calmly received it. You even used the goo poison that can live in a person's brain and turn them into a beast. I have to say that you're really a genius to be able to think of such a method. Gong Yimo's ridicule was like the highest praise to Dong Luani. These are nothing. Later, I'll let the princess taste the heart with heart's goo. This is also my doing. The heart with heart's goo is extremely difficult to cultivate, but not only did I cultivate it, I even improved it. Even if the child goo dies, the mother goo will not die. It's very suitable for the princess. Gong Yimo didn't say anything, and Dong Luani's gaze fell on her abdomen. Also, this unborn child is the goo worm's favorite nutrient. From your tone, it sounds like you've done this kind of thing a lot. Aren't you afraid of retribution for being so heartless? Gong Yimo suddenly said in a gloomy voice. Retribution? Dong Luani seemed to have heard a joke. It's their honor to let me test the poison. Besides, who dares to punish me? She said slowly. Capturing you and Si Wuyin is like having an extra life. Would the regent dare to act rashly? Can Kim Yoon ignore your life and death? In the end, didn't they still have to obediently hand over Yuheng? Retribution. Retribution is that you destroyed everything I had. So now that you've fallen into my hands, you're destined to be tortured by me until you wish you were dead. Gong Yimo's finger moved, and Dong Luani saw it. She chuckled. Don't waste your energy. The effect of the tendon's softening powder lasts for 3 days. After 3 days, you'll already be my puppet. Speaking of this, her eyes flashed. Perhaps I should turn you into my puppet right now. After saying that, she took out a pill. It was clearly the child goo of the one-heart goo. Instead of bringing it back and fighting with those people, you should be my puppet now. Si Wuyin finally couldn't hold it in any longer. You demoness. If you dare to lay your hands on her, do you believe that I'll cripple you with poison? Dong Luani sneered and glanced at him. In the narrow carriage, only her complacent laughter could be heard. Whatever you know, I know. As a disciple, you're still a little lacking if you want to poison your master. Then, she didn't look at Si Wuyin anymore and slowly approached Gong Yimo. Although Gong Yimo wasn't tied up, she had checked her pulse. Gong Yimo was indeed poisoned. She couldn't exert any strength, and even if she resisted, it would be like a cat scratching an itch. Seeing that the pill was getting closer and closer, Gong Yimo wasn't afraid. She had the space in her body, and even if she ate 100 pills, she wouldn't be controlled. But when she thought of that kind of worm in the pill, she couldn't help but feel her scalp go numb, and she became nervous. Seeing that she was afraid, Dong Wani was even more certain that Gong Yimo didn't have a backup plan. Don't be afraid. This little worm is usually very gentle, but if you don't listen to me, it will drill into your heart. That feeling, you definitely don't want to experience it. Gong Yimo suddenly looked up at her, full of coldness. Why? Dong Wani, although you have nothing, you have someone who truly loves you. Isn't it good to live a peaceful life together? Do you want me to kill you before you're satisfied? What do you know? Dong Wani's eyes were burning with rage. I used to be the supreme Empress Dowager. I can kill people if I want to. I have a boy toy if I want to. I have whatever I want. What's the point of being locked up in Jin? Love me? Can he give me power? Can he find a boy toy for me? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. So you killed him? Every day you have to be with those worms, like those people, and become a rat in the gutter? Is this the life that you want? You really don't regret it? Dong Wani suddenly fiercely stuffed the pill in her hand into Gong Yimo's mouth. I don't regret it. Why would I regret it? Wait until I succeed. I will have many men. I don't lack one. When Gong Yimo thought of the worms in the pill, she wanted to struggle. But when she thought of something, she hesitated for a moment and finally decided to swallow it. But at this moment, the curtain in front of the carriage was suddenly pulled open, and the carriage driver, who looked very ordinary, suddenly grabbed Dong Wani's hand. The pill rolled on the ground, and he picked it up and said gloomily, Madam Dong, although you have caught Gong Yimo, she doesn't belong to you. Dong Wani flew into a rage out of humiliation when her hand was suddenly grabbed. How dare you? I am the one who caught her. Why doesn't she belong to me? The carriage driver turned his head and gave Gong Yimo a gloomy look. Gong Yimo hated the way he looked at goods. She is the key to our plan. If Madame Dong doesn't cooperate, you can try Master's methods. When he mentioned Master, Dong Wani inexplicably became a little angry. Gong Yimo guessed that this so-called Master should be the mastermind behind the scenes. He was very powerful, and Dong Wani was also very afraid of him. After the carriage driver gave his warning, he closed the curtain and continued driving. Dong Wani hugged the fire jade slip in her arms, and an indescribable light flashed in her eyes. The carriage quickly passed through the miasma cloud forest. The sky gradually darkened, and the snow stopped. Finally, it fell into complete darkness. Gong Dai almost overturned the entire Yuheng Imperial Palace. He caught that witch, forced her to gather all the prisoners, and then went to find the royal sister. But the royal sister didn't wait for him and went alone. Gong Dai originally wanted to catch her and teach her a good lesson, but who knew that he couldn't find her after turning the entire palace upside down? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.